welcome the Holy Trinity High School. Welcome to a sitting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. Are there students up there from the St. James Primary School? No? Not as yet. All right, I guess we're expecting them. Members, we have in front of us the Ministry of Transport and Mining, reminded that they were invited last week, but because of the dealing with the fiscal policy paper, the half-yearly reports, we were not able to accommodate them. So we asked them to come back this week. So I think we should be working towards completing the Ministry of Transport and Mining this week. So let us keep it tight and precise. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Philip Paulwell, Honorable Rudyard Spencer, Mrs. Marissa Dalrymple Filbert, Honorable Flavel Williams, and Mr. Dwayne Vaz. Is there any other apology? No other apology. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, September 27th? It was circulated. Can we take it as being read?
Seconded.
Seconded. All right. All right, members, before we go further, there was some additional information that was sought from the Ministry of Transport and Mining, the Ian Fleming International Airport, which is the development plan, business plan, which has been circulated. Members would have received it. Also, the dealing with the enterprise team of the Norman Manley, the divestment of the Norman Manley International Airport. That was also circulated, and also an update on the upgrade of the Sangster International Airport. Members, I would suggest to the substantive chairman at some other point that these two, especially the divestment of the Norman Manley Airport and the issue with the Ian Fleming Airport, that we look at it at another stage. Because reading this document, especially to deal with the divestment of the NMIA, I think there are some additional questions that we need to deal with. If you have read it, you would have seen what I'm mentioning, especially to do with the cost of this, of what it will cost for the divestment, and also some of the information given to us in the committee meeting on the prospective development of the Ian Fleming International Airport. And what this document is saying, that there are some differences between what was told to us and what is in the actual document. And there seemed to be a delay in the extension of the runway that has been proposed, as there seems to be other parties that is to be engaged in making that final decision that is not yet at the board meeting of the Airports Authority Board. So I think there are some further questions that needs to be asked on this issue. But the documents have been circulated, and I would members need to go through them and avail themselves on the information. All right, we move to item 6, which is a review of the status reports of the Ministry of Transport and Mining. I'll ask that they be invited inside now.
Mr. Chair.
As stated here on the, I would make an adjustment of just bringing, you have the JUTC, then I would say the Transport Authority, and then we go down. I would just move the Transport Authority to second, and then go down the line. Accepted? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I don't see the toll operators listed here on the items, though we do have statements from them. Is it that we intend not to?
Is it your toll operators? No, are they here? Members here? No? Sorry. Welcome, Permanent Secretary Hales and your team. Allow you to make your opening statement, introduction of your team, and then we'll start off with, as listed, only one amendment to the agenda. We start off with the Jamaican Urban Transit Company and Transport Authority, Railway Corporation, Maritime Authority, and Jamaica Bauxite Institute, in that order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all the entities referenced are present here today. In addition, we have brought along the Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited and Clarendon Alumina Partners, the local partners in the operations at in St. Anne and in Jamalco. In terms of the team, I have sitting to my left our acting Chief Technical Director, Mrs. Smith-Fagan, and then to her left is our Principal Finance Officer, Mr. Richard DePaz, and then to his left is Dr. Oral Rainford, Principal Director for the Minerals Division of the Ministry. We also have from the agencies Mr. Bertrand Smith, Director of Legal Affairs of the Maritime Authority, and Mr. Michael McFarlane, the Director of Corporate Services. Unfortunately, the Director General, Rear Admiral Peter Brady, was not able to be here as he is abroad on official business. From the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, we have Mr. Paul Abrams, and you can just raise your hand when I call so that the members can identify you. Mr. Paul Abrams, the Managing Director, and Ms. Marcia Hamilton, the Deputy Managing Director in charge of Finance and Corporate Services, Corporate Planning. From the Jamaica Ultimate Tire Company, we have Mr. Victor Green, Acting General Manager, and Mr. Garnet Murray, the Principal Financial Controller. From the Transport Authority, sitting just behind me, Mr. Cecil Morgan, the Managing Director, and Mrs. Yvonne Henry, in charge of accounts. We have from the Jamaica Bauxite Institute, Mr. Paris Liao Ayi, Managing Director, and then we have Mr. Coy Roach from Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited, and we have from Clarendon Alumina Partners, Mr. Winston Hayden, the Managing Director. From the Jamaica Railway Corporation, we have Mr. Fitzroy Williams, the General Manager, and Mr. Hopton McLeish, the Deputy, Mr. Hopeland McLeish, the Finance Director. From the Ministry, we also have Ms. Paula Brown, Acting Director of Transport, Policy. That's the team, Mr. Chairman, and as requested, we are proposing that when you deal with each sector, the team leader stroke managing director can give a little overview of his or her sector, and then the question and answers can proceed, or any other way that you deem to be appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Abrams, would you like to?
Morning, committee. Morning, Chairman. The JUTC has its fair share of challenges. However, we assiduously work to operate a system, a public transportation system, which is critical and vital to the movement of commuters in the Kingston metropolitan region. There are some issues that we do have challenges with, but as we go through every day, we deal with them. One of our main challenges, as you know, maybe finances and keeping the operation in a functioning manner. Thank you.
That's it. Members? Members, is there any questions? Or you missed that? You missed that opening statement. All right. Thanks, Mr. Abrams. I was looking through your operating statements that have been submitted. And I remember when you last was here, the issue of your rolling stock on buses was a topical issue. And how is it that, and the availability of parts that the JUTC has in its own possession. I remember the daily rollout of the buses were below what you had wished for because of the availability of parts. In this current financial year, there was an allotment of about, 1.5 billion, I think it was?
1.3.
1.3 billion for parts. Can you give us a status report, basically, on the availability of parts as you have now, and your daily rollout, and how it is that the age of the buses is now impacting the functionality or efficiency of the JUTC?
Thank you, Chair. For the parts situation, we have sufficient parts, and we have funding through the Ministry of Finance for adequate parts. We have not achieved the rollout as we would have wanted because of the age of these buses. Because of a poor maintenance operation in the past, we are finding that a number of buses now are having issues, major issues, such as transmission and engines. So our function right now is to handle the easy repairs so we can at least have the fleet rolling to a comfortable position as we then target the major repairs. Our rollout at this present time, we have been able to achieve a 430 availability rollout. We still are short of that target of 452. We anticipate by hopefully December or January we should be up to the 450 region.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Help me a little bit, Mr. Abrams. In answering the question, you said that you were okay with financing for the parts, which was the big hurdle you had last time around.
Correct.
When you say you have funding, is it committed funding or available funding?
It's from the Ministry of Finance funding.
No, what do they say? They say that, is it in the budget?
It's in the budget, yes.
It's available?
Well, yes, it's available, but we have it taken in a monthly period.
Yeah. The reason why I ask that, because quite often there are entities that there are allocation in the budget, but for some reason the cash flow is not there to meet the purchases, and you have the problem of the buses being down because you can't purchase the parts. So I just wanted to clarify that. But there's another part to that question. Those parts for which you needed funded for is for a certain stock of buses that you need, not just to maintain those, but to repair some that was down, right?
That is correct, yeah.
So those parts that were on order is to bump up your rolling stock. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And repair.
Ongoing
repairs.
Yes, yes.
Ongoing major repairs.
Ongoing major repair. Now, a little bit of concern I have, Chair, is when I heard you said that you have the age of the buses or what, and you have a good amount that can't be basically be kept in the rolling stock.
We have a number of buses that we have to schedule only on certain periods because of their age and their reliability. So we run them out basically in the morning peak, we take them off during the day and run it back out in the evening peak, but they're not able to stay out all day. That is some of the buses we have.
So how long those buses, and give us an idea of how many of it, and how long you were able to do that? 1 year, 2 years, 10 years?
We've been managing to hold it together since May. But really, as you know, public transportation is peak. That's the peak operation, public transportation. So I would say maybe another year we would definitely have to look at some new rolling stock in a year.
And have to retire those buses?
Either that or put them into a major rehabilitation program, which is what is critical.
But sorry, Mahmoud, because one of the concerns that we have is the cost of keeping those buses compared to putting new buses in the fleet itself. I think the only set of buses you got were those, 15 or 12, the smaller Chinese buses?
Yeah, 35 of the smaller Chinese
35
buses. Yeah.
of the Chinese buses,
Right.
which you're using on the hillier routes, which seems to be working well so far. But seeing that the subsidy that government on a whole has to give to the Jamaican Urban Transit Company, seeing that their fare box seems to be affected by the rollout of the buses, the cost of just servicing these buses, then there has to be a decision that is made in which makes better financial sense. Is it that we're going to maintain these buses that they have lived their useful life in many instances, may cost you twice as much to maintain these buses than if it is that you are going to put new buses in the rolling stock? And I mean, I know that's a policy decision, but I would like to ask the Permanent Secretary, what is putting us to this point, or is it that the ministry is looking at updating the rolling stock of the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, or is it that we're going to find another $1.5 or $2 billion in parts to maintain buses that can't even go out on many times in the peak period?
The ministry did in fact make a significant submission last year for new rolling stock, and that was something that carried over from the previous administration. The submission was considered by Ministry of Finance, and they, having done their own due diligence, were of the view that the JUTC should not be purchasing any new buses based on the whole fiscal space and the debt ceiling scenario until 2021. But they have made a commitment to provide parts to keep the existing stock rolling, and they did make the commitment to support. That was already in the budget, in the 16-17 budget, to support the 35 Chinese buses. I think the JUTC, having already done its own fleet, a review of its fleet, and made some recommendations, ought to do the analysis, because as you rightly say, Mr. Chairman, there is the trade-off between purchasing new buses and keeping aging fleet running, and they do have a cost. They do have a cost in terms of the money that is required to keep them running. They do have a cost on the environment in terms of emissions and pollution, and also there is always the risk also of the safety of operating them once they get very, very old. So that is the kind of analysis that the JUTC is now undertaking, so that we can revisit the whole matter of the fleet with the Ministry of Finance, because I don't think, based on what the Managing Director is saying, we are going to be able to hold the existing fleet together until 2021.
Yeah, but because, Pierce, it doesn't take a rocket science to tell you that the cost of maintenance of the older fleet is probably 3 to 4 times more than if you had a newer fleet. That is just makes no financial sense. And if just by the own words of the Managing Director, that the current fleet that you have there now, many of the buses within another year, it would be hard to maintain them. And that's why even in the Standing Finance Committee at the beginning of the financial year, I made the point that this $1.5 billion or $1.3 billion, and we know that it is not when the Managing Director makes a request that it will always be fulfilled by the Ministry of Finance, because it depends on the Ministry of Finance's cash flow. Because it is being said that even some smaller parts that is needed, he has to prioritize between which depot gets it from which depot doesn't. He wants windscreens right now that he cannot even get, that they're naming the buses that they're dry weather buses. And the subsidy itself that the public purse gives to the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, it is something that all of us, inside of this committee, outside of this committee, has to look at. We are now subsidizing a school bus system in Clarendon that is probably subsidized 4 times more than you have. Then you have the Transport Authority issuing more license on JUTC routes. And if the fare box on an annual basis is decreasing, then there is a problem. And it is how that we remedy that problem, that it doesn't cost the public any more than it is right now. That is what our concern should be as a committee and as a ministry. So, you know, to say that we're not looking at any rolling stocks until 2021, for me as the interim chair, as even as a spokesperson on transport, it is of concern because that $1.3 billion that you're spending on parts, you and I know that is not even enough to service what the JUTC needs right now. It isn't. Members, I must start.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to Mr. Abrams. Mr. Abrams, there seemed to be what I would describe as a wanton and a callous attack on the buses in recent time. What do you think would have attributed to this, and how do you plan to stem this attack on the public transportation system?
I didn't get the first part of your question, sir.
I'm saying that there seemed to be a wanton and a callous attack on your buses. I saw you last night on the news speaking to it, but what would you say would have attributed towards this? Because we have never had such wanton attack, and how do you plan to stem this?
Well, I think this orchestrated attack started all the way from 2013. We have data from 2013, 2014. We're tracking data on 2015, 2016. So a total of 237 attacks are going back to 2013. We have done our intelligence and we have gotten information. We have forwarded this information on to the High Command. As you know, there was a press conference yesterday, and they have assigned to us specific persons. The information that they were given, which I would rather not say at this present time because it is something that they're investigating right now, speaks to how they're going to approach and help us. The problem with this issue is that these things are done, these acts are done under the cover of darkness, and they're done behind walls and bushes, and it's a very challenging issue to resolve. We are offering, as you know, a Crime Stop Award. We are going to engage the various areas which we have drilled down to where these acts are taking place. We're going to speak to the civic associations, we're going to speak to the member of parliaments, we're going to speak to the councils, etc. in the area to bring them, and the schools, to bring them aware of what is happening. If we, and probably a lot of persons, thought this was persons with idle hands. It is not idle hands. Our information has proved that it's an orchestrated attack against the bus companies. We have found out this information. And as I said, unfortunately, I'm not able to divulge that to you right now. But it is not idle hands. And just to say that, should a stone be hurled into a bus, the bus has to come off route, it has to go to the police station, has to make a report, and then return back to the depot. At that point, the route does not have anyone to service it. So if you put 2 and 2 together, probably you can figure out where I'm going with this. And we have information. We have information on it.
Through the chair, could you say what are the key communities or areas that you're experiencing this particular difficulty with?
We have that information, and as I said, we have turned this over to the High Command, but we are also looking at the areas and drilling down the times, the dates, and the locations. And that information is not 100% foolproof yet, but we will have that information probably by no later than Monday or Friday, because we're going back this information all the way from 2013 now. which you had 52 incidents in 2013. I think you had some 37 in 14. We have not able to track down 15 yet. 2016 was 28, and 17 has gone from January to September, 81 incidents.
Through the chair again, it would be wonderful if, when the analysis is done in terms of the amount of incidents that you have had, that you map them and determine which communities are targeting the buses, so that we are also well aware where our focus needs to be.
We intend to publicize that information when it does come, or have discussions with the various parties to assist in trying to resolve this.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up. While you await the data, do you think, from what you've gathered thus far, that there's a particular motive ascribed to this stone throwing? Is it to disrupt the operation of the JUTC or some other nefarious motive? Is that what your intelligence is leading to?
I understand your question, but as I said earlier, we have the information that does speak to the reason that this is happening. We have not been able to get to the perpetrators yet, but we have now got the information as to why this is happening. And I think once we are able to get this information from 13, 14, 15, 16 and have it on a spreadsheet, we're going to look at where the information speaks to ridership on the routes, times, and this all happens in peak period. 90% it happens in the peak operation. So the bus is taken off the route at that point. So we are going back 13 to 17. We're checking ridership numbers, where the decrease was, what happens, the time, the dates, and all this information is being forwarded to High Command.
And again, through you, Mr. Chairman, in terms of your operational costs, I mean, this must have set you guys back, I mean, in the region of perhaps millions. Do you have those figures computed as yet, the operational cost as it relates to having to take these buses off route, replacement, repairs, that kind of expenditure?
We're probably in the region of about 65 million, 70 million, because it's not just a matter of the bus being damaged. It's a matter of a possible injury to a commuter, which becomes a legal matter. Then the bus has to sit because it cannot earn revenue on the road. Then the staff has to be paid. So the ripple effect just continues, and that information is also being prepared to the real cost of what this is doing, because we've only been paying attention to the damage to the buses. We have been paying attention to what the external cost is, which is also astronomical. You can imagine if you have 15 or 20 buses sitting for a month that can't operate every day. You can imagine what that must accumulate to.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Abrams, to you again. How do you treat with persons who are injured on your bus as it relates to the medical and their compensation there? Another question has to do with, could you give us a breakdown of the expenses of salaries, goods, and services that you incur, say on a monthly basis, on operating the bus company?
Through the chair, could I just ask my question? So, since it is connected to the issue of the stone throwing, Mr. Abrams, sorry, in going forward, I would like to make a recommendation, if you could, when you have an incident, that you also pay attention to what takes place after the buses have to move off. Is it that they offload the passengers? Are other persons given the opportunity to then come and pick up those passengers? And is the private operation significantly boosted by the fact that the JUTC bus is now off the route? That is the level of analysis that we would like to see coming out of the situation, so that we know for sure who benefits from the government having to suck up the costs and the inconvenience to the public of this type of action.
Well, first of all, yes, the customers have to be offloaded at that time, because the bus has to immediately has to go to the police station for a report. We try at that point to get another bus into the system quickly, but persons usually do not wait for another bus to arrive wherever we can get it from. So it's the alternate form of transportation that will usually step in and pick up those passengers. But that data is being prepared also.
Let me ask though, Mr. Abrams, for you two, about how much money would the JUTC need to adequately service or bypass to service that aging fleet that you have on an annual basis?
Is that inclusive of duty? I would say probably about 1.9 billion for parts allocation and at least another 500 million for refurbishing.
For refurbishing?
Refurbishing.
You're talking about 2.4 billion.
I would think probably 2.4, 2.5 would be the figure, if we're going to try and keep the rolling stock reliable.
Reliable.
And reliable is the important word. Not that a bus goes out in the morning and comes back in by 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
It has to stay out and operate all day.
Yeah, reasonable. So we have a shortfall there then in what you have been allocated for this year to what is actually needed. Yeah? What is the difference now between your fare box compare at this point in time or up to last month comparative to the previous year?
About 1.5 billion. About 1.5 billion. It's about 19% down. Between 19%, which equates to what, about 1 billion, 1.3. It's about 19% down. It's about 1 billion roughly.
Down by 1 billion.
Yeah.
And would you say that that the infiltration of other carriers on the JUTC routes affecting your fare box?
I think it would be fair to say that there is significant competition out there.
On the JUTC routes?
Routes in the KMTR.
All right.
Chairman, may
I have a question. Could you just repeat your question, Mr.? Could you just repeat your question for me? Your earlier question.
Yes, I did ask about the impact on persons who were affected when the buses were stoned. How do you plan to treat with those persons who are affected? And I did ask for a breakdown of your expenses between goods, services, and salaries.
Does he have this table? $3.4. Don't follow you. Your question for the compensations? 831 million. And for your first question, if a person is injured on the bus, we would at that point call medical services immediately to assist that person, or if we're able to get them to the hospital as quick as possible. Luckily, we have not had a situation to this point where grievous injury has taken place. So we're we're hoping to stem out this thing before something seriously does happen.
Well, sorry to be crisscrossing like that, but the average age of your rolling stock is about how old are these vehicles?
We have some ranging from 1999, which are articulated buses that we operate only in a peak issue, going from the dormitory areas of Spanish Town and Portmore. They are actually on their last leg right now. Those would be required to be rehabilitated, as the cost of a new articulated bus is in the region of 400 to 500,000. So
Euros or US?
You could say US in that region.
US.
Let's say US. Those are the buses that we'd want to rehabilitate to save the cost on the purse. The average fleet, I would say, also goes from 2007 up to 2015. So I would say...
And the average lifespan of one of these buses is about what?
Average lifespan international is about 20 years. In Jamaica, we are touching the level at almost 10 years only. Because of lack of maintenance and terrain, etc. So we are averaging probably 10 years. And by the end of the 10th year, we are the bus is in bad shape.
And how is it then with the reduction in your fare box as it is now, which and the subvention that comes from central government, which was somewhat cut in this financial year? How is it now that the JUTC is managing to pay its bills?
The JUTC is surviving. It's operating. It does operate. It does roll out 410 buses daily. We are behind in our payables, but we are able to work with our creditors to ensure that the operation still functions. But yes, it is a challenge, a major challenge.
All right, coming to that now, because looking at your page 5 of your accounts payable and accrued charges, statutory payables, current year to date, 6.6, that's $1 billion?
That's correct.
And this is coming back from when?
2005. Possibly from 2005.
Now, if my memory serves me well, especially in the last in the last 2 financial years, that the Ministry of Finance, as part of their subvention to the JUTC, would have, because there was a downward trajectory of this figure, but it seems to be creeping back up, of this $6.6 billion, 6.6 statutory payments for the JUTC. Can you shed any light on what is happening with this? Because it seems to not be going down, but going up. And if that is the case, then I can imagine that the monthly subvention to the JUTC probably short and coming also.
Yes, the subvention does not assist the payments of the statutories.
Yeah, so that's why I'm putting it to the PS, because it was an arrangement between the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Finance in dealing with this figure.
I think in the 6 billion figure, it should be noted that the 2.6 is principal and 4 billion is interest and penalties.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I should point out that there has not been any arrangement yet that will put an end to the accumulation of these figures. There has been arrangement from time to time that might have dealt with arrears that have accumulated, but in terms of bringing this situation, fixing it once and for all. There has not been any arrangement, neither arrangement through the fare box nor any arrangement through the subvention. The subvention has remained somewhat static over time, and some of the subvention, the use of the subvention or the application of the subvention had been prescribed. For instance, there are certain debts that the subvention is used to servicing, and so it doesn't really help the JUTC with its day-to-day operations very much.
But if you look at even the figure of $50 million just below, which is salary deduction payable, which is monies that should be taken from salaries to pay over, that cannot even be paid. And let me tell you why.
Chair, that is current. That has been paid. That is current.
That has now been dealt with.
That is current.
But
yes.
let me tell
We
you
are now current.
why I'm bringing up the issue in a larger context, PS. I'm not being fooled that the JUTC itself will not have to be subsidized. But I think it is incumbent on us, despite which administration in power, to make it as best efficient to reduce that subsidy to the taxpayers. And what we have been seeing is that efficiency that is needed, the attention is not being paid to the JUTC. And by God, I mean, we have to commend the staff at the JUTC for keeping it as a going concern. But that support from government itself to get it to that point where we can say that the subsidy from the taxpayers can be less, because we're increasing the fare boxes, we're making it more efficient. You and I know that that is not being given. Because for an administration to say that they're not looking at putting in any new buses until 2021, and just from the managing director himself, needing at least $2 to $2.5 billion worth of just parts itself for maintenance and for upgrade of the buses that are there, upkeep and maintenance. And we are providing 1.3. Not only that, we have on the JUTC routes, you have more private operators which have been licensed by the government authority to operate on these JUTC routes. So, you know, that comprehensive look at the transport sector, especially in the KMTR, is something that it needs to be done with urgency. Because we can't keep going to the taxpayers, and those of us who are rural MPs will understand even more, because we are subsidizing the KMTR, but then you have those out in the rural Jamaica that has no subsidy at all. And to ask taxpayers to spend billions on an annual basis to subsidize something that the government itself or the ministry itself is not paying enough attention to reduce the losses, then as a committee, I think it is of concern, and should be of concern not only inside here but outside of this parliament. You know, so, you know, as we come to the half-year mark of our financial year, and you're going to be doing a budget call now, it is something that we need to look at urgently. Otherwise, Mr. Abrams won't be here talking about limping along, but we'll be talking about the death rights that we're now going to be committing over the JUTC. And that's not what we want to see inside here. We know what we had before and what it is that the JUTC is capable of. But let us pay some attention to it, because this in itself, and it cannot be that a government agency is owing so much in taxes, be 2 billion or 6 billion. And we are asking persons outside there to ensure that they play their part and do their part. And yet still we're not doing enough to help the JUTC going on. Yeah, it's look tardy, man. It's not in good order, PS. Not in good order.
Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on, one at a time. Go ahead, and then Mr. Campbell after.
All right, thank you. Mr. P.S., Mr. Managing Director, as I understand it, much of the problems with the JUTC fleet, and in particular in terms of expenditure, were things that your new board inherited. I understand also that you had some difficulties as it relates to the wrong manufacturing fluid being used in on some of the buses, and that this would have caused, an increase in expenditure to replace parts that would have been damaged by the wrong manufacturing fluid being used. I also understand that there was, prior to your new board last year, that there was also an issue in terms of getting spare parts, etc. Can you indicate precisely what was the condition of the JTC fleet when your board took over last year, and what you have done subsequently to minimize the expenditure to the taxpayers of Jamaica?
The fleet back in when the board took over, I would say in probably June, we will say, of 2016. We categorized the fleet as to what we could get back in operation quickly. I remember saying in here, I think in probably November, I think, I'm not mistaken, that we had no parts in the system at that point. And actually back in September, I said that the fleet would be in severe trouble because there was a severe part shortage. And the first set of parts came in late December, early January. When we categorized the fleet, we were looking at buses that would get back into operation quickly, and buses that were in serious repair, such as engines and transmissions and differentials. We placed those behind because we wanted to get the fleet back up in operation as quick as possible. We managed to concentrate on that section of buses, and then we are now looking at repairing the damaged fleet, which, because of poor maintenance and poor lubricant use, non-manufactured lubricant use, those engines and transmissions now are starting to show up right now, because the damage for such a unit would not show up immediately. It's after a period of time of wear that you would see these damages start to appear. And in JUTC's defense, our peak operation, the buses are extremely loaded. So it's not only that it's a wrong lubricant, it's the amount of wear that the buses are going through. So what we're finding right now is quite a number of them are showing up with severe damage, engines, transmissions, that we're having to rebuild right now, which is taking a toll on our subvention for repairs. So it was quite a bit of incorrect lubricants that has caused some serious damage, which we are having to battle with right now.
And through you, Mr. Chair, can you indicate how many buses are, so when you took over in 2016, what was the total number of the fleet, whether it was 300 and something, I can't recall the figure, but of that, let's say 370 buses when you took over, or 400 buses when you took over, how many of those buses were damaged, whether by virtue of the engines, transmissions, etc., due to the faulty lubricants that you said were being used prior to your board taking over, one, and two, how many were just parked because there were no parts, which made them just ineffective?
I think in about June or July of last year, there was some 100+ buses that were parked for no parts. Yes, some 100 buses, yeah, parked for lack of parts. There was probably another.
That is a quarter of the fleet?
About an eighth of the fleet. Then you had probably close to another 40 or 50 that had serious damage repair to be done. So in September, October 2016, the fleet reached a low of close to 350 operating units. And we struggled severely at that time because if you run out 350 units, you have a 10% return. So by the end of the morning shift, we were returning another 20 or 30 out of that 350. So we were, if you recall, at that period, we were, a lot of publicity at JUTC could not supply passengers, and a lot of it came out of Portmore, et cetera, et cetera. So we did suffer severely in October. We managed to get the fleet back into a reasonable 400 position by January, February, and right now we are looking at a rollout of 430. But we are challenged right now because we have a number of major repairs that are now coming forward of buses that are showing signs of major defects right now.
But I just want to add to that, though, members, is that, and the reason why you hear me talking about the replenishment is because the financial year before that, some $800 million was spent on parts. And you're spending another $1.3 billion. Then what we will have to even top that up in the next financial year to just service the buses. And you have only had, what, just the 35 new buses that have been added to the fleet in the last, what, 4 years? 3 years?
In the last 3 years.
Because you had
2
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you had some before that.
Right.
But in the last 3 years, only 35 new buses.
Through the chair, though, if the buses are supposed to last for 20 years, outside of terrain, with my limited driving knowledge and expertise, I will tell you, it is a very clear sign that improper maintenance would have led us to a place where you're inheriting 100 broken down buses out of 430, almost a quarter of the fleet not being functional. And that is actually a stark statement to make.
Yes, there was a severe challenge back in July, August, September, severe challenge.
But those 100 buses didn't go down all at once.
No, we had 100 buses parked for major repairs.
Up to June, until you got those parts.
Until we got those parts in, and we started to filter them back in.
You started the fleet with about 400, 420 buses. That's why I'm saying they were not all broken down all at once.
No, we did have a number of, yes, we did have a number of buses sitting.
Yes.
Yeah, we did have a number of buses
No,
down.
I'm agreeing with you.
Right.
I'm agreeing with you that you had a number of buses. What I'm trying to say to the members is that they're not all, all right. I won't politicize the thing, so go on.
Mr. Chairman, I think what the managing director is saying is also reinforcing the case that maybe there's also a need to revisit with the Ministry of Finance to look at the replenishment policy, because what he has discovered and what he has found would have come about after the Ministry of Finance had made its initial assessment where it has restricted the purchase of new buses. I think it's something that we should revisit based on the expenditure that had to be made to bring the fleet up to what it is now, and the kind of expenditure that will have to be made to maintain it, given that the buses, the average ages of the buses, with the exception of the last 200, is in the 10-year, 12-year region. So we definitely have to revisit with the Ministry of Finance in terms of the policy for the replenishment of fleet.
Member Campbell first, and then you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put the question to Mr. Abrams. In relation to the fleet, you say at the maximum operating level, you should have somewhere in the region of 400 buses. And what is the staff level required to have these buses operating?
The international standard is about 2.5 driver to bus ratio. 2.5.
2 point
driver to bus ratio, and then about 5 staff to bus ratio, about 5. So
right.
It should be that I think we should be in the region of about maybe 1,800 persons now. I would think that would be the. I left the JUTC in 2012, operating 400 buses with 1,780 persons.
1780.
Yeah, I think that's the optimum level for the JUTC now.
And what is the current level?
2,250 persons.
I'm not sure that I heard the figure correctly.
2,250 persons.
2,000. So you're overstaffed by in the region of 500 persons?
Yes, we have a number of persons that were overstaffed by.
Mr. Abrams, what I want you to tell me, did you employ those persons that you're overstaffed by?
No. Absolutely not, no.
What have you done subsequent to taking control of the JUTC to reduce the staff levels to the maximum number of staff required to operate that bus company?
There's a number of acting and temporary positions that are in the JUTC right now, close to some 300. We are doing a rationalization at this present time with the HR department as to look at what persons have been put elsewhere from their substantive posts and temporary persons had. We should be actually completing that rationalization by sometime next week, at which time representation will have to be made to the minister as to what will have to happen to these additional persons that need to be removed from the JUTC.
Pardon me if I seem a little bit ruffled, but what would account for a management decision to have an in excess of 500 persons? I'm not sure I understand it because I'm a mere lawyer. I don't understand the numbers and management in its.
That would be the rationalization that is being done now with respect to the amount of drivers required and the various levels of personnel required. But I think it's fair to say that we are over. We do have too many persons right now.
Member Holness, may I, Mr. Chair? There is something concerning me in relation to this. What is the additional cost that you've had to bear in relation to these additional 500 persons over the period, and we're talking about this budgetary year, that's starting. No, well, let's confine ourselves to the period under review, which is 2017-18, and we're talking about April through now. What is the additional cost that this company has had to bear because of these additional 500 persons?
Approximately about 25 million per month in additional wages.
Hold on. Let me ask you again. You said you had needed 2.5, but that's drivers?
Driver to bus ratio is 2.5.
And how many persons per bus in total, other staff?
Staff to bus is about 4.
4?
Yeah.
So, which
drivers.
includes
staff to bus is drivers. Staff to bus ratio and driver to bus ratio.
And you said you had how many buses you're operating from?
At that time, we were at...
No, we're talking now.
Currently, right now, 410, 420 buses.
All right, so if you were to put 5 per bus at the 400 buses, you'd basically be in line with the 2,050?
Not exactly, because It's an international standard. But we have to operate within our context at the JUTC. So we probably would say we're about 300 persons.
There are 300 persons.
Probably 300
overstaffed.
persons that we are overstaffed at this point. But as I said, the rationalization is being done now.
Yeah, but even with the rationalization, we have seen where persons who have been released and other persons employed in their space. So is that a part of the rationalization?
That is strictly managerial positions.
Yeah.
We are looking at drivers. We're looking at,
As it is now, you're short of engineers.
yes,
You are short of engineers.
of a few engineers, yes.
Of qualified engineers.
Qualified engineers, yes. In the maintenance department.
In the maintenance department.
But those are a few persons.
And but those are but it is critical to the maintenance
Yes,
of the buses.
they are a critical component.
Because you have been losing them to the Canadian work program and other work programs. Yeah? So, how is it that we're also going to replenish? Because it has been a concern at the JUTC of the attrition of these persons who you train, or at the JUTC expense, that we're losing them to, and not having adequate persons within the system itself to perform their roles.
The grade 1 mechanics are a high attrition. There are very favorable offerings to them abroad. We are starting our own training program, which we have requested from overseas assistants to come in and retrain. We set up a training facility, and we are now going to have persons from Europe come down to train our persons to continue training in the absence of when they leave. These suppliers will come in and give us 2 weeks, but there's not much that we can obtain in 2 weeks. So we are asking them now.
After we train them, do we bond them?
We have tried bonding them. We have not been successful. But when an offer comes in from Canada or America, and it's very, very lucrative, it's very difficult to hold these grade 1 mechanics because they are exceptionally trained persons.
No, I understand
Very
that,
exceptionally trained persons.
I mean, we may have to look at, members, even at legislation and how it is that you bond these persons after you have spent taxpayers' resources in training them. Because it's not only in this sector, but right across in other sectors. I mean, you've seen where even the bauxite sector is talking about not having enough engineers to employ within that sector. I'm surprised sometimes when I hear persons say that there is no work here. But when everybody looking at the business sector, not looking at the engineering, the mechanics, the electricians, there is work out there. Yeah, and as legislators, we may have to look at how it is that we bond these persons, that for them to abscond on that training and go elsewhere, be it attractive. Also, we probably need to look at how the remuneration for these individuals to keep them here, because we do need them.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Abrams mentioned in answering the question about staff per bus. He alluded to some international benchmarking. Yes, it depends also on how the organization operates. If you stick to your core business of operating the buses and collecting your fares, and if you have necessary equipment, some buses are manned by 1 person, some by 2 persons, and also the extent to which you outsource some of the operations. I hear him talking about the grade 1 mechanics and so forth. Some of the services can be outsourced, and even some of the administrative services and maintenance, office maintenance, things like that can be outsourced, which can minimize your staff. We are looking at the JUTC from a strategic perspective in terms of putting in place some efficiency measures. Efficiency in terms of the staffing and the structure, efficiency in terms of the fuel usage, storage and managing of the fuel system, and also looking at, ultimately we are also going to be looking at alternative fuel systems, and also other efficiency measures that can improve the operation of the JUTC. The restructuring that Mr. Abrams speak of is something that they are pursuing in earnest. Of course, we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's a heavily unionized organization, and a restructuring process is going to take some time to implement and to get the agreement of the unions, except of course for the temporary staff. He mentioned some temporary staff. We're not sure right now what percentage of them are temporary, but definitely for the permanent staff and for some of the excess staff that are permanent, it's going to take a while because we have to come to some agreement with the union. And we anticipate, and the unions have been understanding in the past. We have had a very good industrial relations climate out there of the fact that the organization is not making big profit or any profit for that matter, and therefore and that has influenced how they deal with the JUTC. And I'm sure that some arrangement can be made that will optimize the staff level to bring it back down to where it ought to be, and maybe to optimize even further if we look at outsourcing some of the operations that are now carried out in-house.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire from PS?
Is it on the same? Because I think
Yes.
you're okay. Is it on the same? Because remember.
Well, as I understand it, the PS has put a rider on what Mr. Abrams has said, and in that rationalization, as you know it, would you recommend that the PR department, as I understand it, you have somewhere in the region of 35 persons in that department, would you recommend that department be outsourced?
That is one department that could easily be outsourced primarily, and it could be significantly reduced in numbers. It's a PR, and I think marketing is tied up in there as well. The JUTC have a captive market, and I think the marketing may have to do more with promotion than with trying to sell its services. And I think the JUTC, as the chairman pointed out, needs to work closely also with the licensing, Transport Licensing Authority, to rationalize and to agree on routes that are best suitable for the JUTC and routes that might be more suitable for the private sector. But PR department of 35, 37 persons, yes, I would agree that's an overkill.
And can this the question which follows is for Mr. Abrahams. What's the cost of operating that department currently?
That department also has a staff complement of customer service reps. I don't have that figure at hand right now, exactly what that department, but it's safe to say that we have started to rationalize the PR department already. A number of those persons have been put back to their substantive posts because they were they were in the PR department as acting. So we have sent them back to their substantive post. So we have started to rationalize already that department down to less than 10 persons right now.
All right. Member Holness.
P.S. More so yourself than Mr. Abrams, having listened to you both. I am going back to the issue of inefficiency. My background is business and accounting. Though the JUTC is run by the government, at the end of the day, it is myself and others as taxpayers who pay for the inefficiency. Now, if What I'm hearing is that over the last couple of years, until Mr. Abrams and the new board took effect, we had major issues of overstaffing. We had major issues of not even having the parts required to fix the buses that he inherited. It means that persons were getting away with collecting their salaries and using government resources in such a way that we were running down the JUTC. And Chairman, I'm not being political. I don't believe we should just broad brush and move over it and move forward. Have we sat down and done any analysis as it relates to what is the efficient operation of the JUTC? What are the benchmarks and targets in terms of the staffing required to carry out the functions? What is required in terms of the maintenance apparatus and schedule? And what is actually the efficient status that should be maintained? And how could we preside over the years, and that's why I said, PS, this is for you, because you would have been there at the time, over an organization that we have allowed to deteriorate to the extent that we are spending $300 million a year approximately on salaries that could have bought replacement buses.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the issue of the efficiency, efficient operation of the JUTC has always been something that has preoccupied the ministry, the government, the JUTC over time. And the problem has eluded many an administration of the JUTC, boards and managers. In fact, in the first 10 years of its operation, JUTC had 10 different presidents, CEO, whatever you call them. What transpired over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, though, I must remind the member that I was not there during that time. I was actually over by water, land, environment, and climate change, and neither was different portfolio. But
so PS, don't take any responsibility for your predecessor, but help us to understand what took place, what sort of madness took place at the time.
It's challenging for me to go into that, but I think Mr. Abrams alluded to I mentioned the increase in the number. He said when he left there in early 2012, there were 1,700 persons, and when he came back, he found the increase to 2,250, and significant growth in the PR department, and at the same time he had deficiencies in some of the technical areas like in engineering and so forth, still obtains. I do not know what were the policies that would have guided the operation in that period of time. The minister had in fact instructed some management audit from as far back as last year. We had some issues, discussion between the ministry and the board that did not allow that process to take place in its entirety, but we have sent in our internal auditors into the JUTCs as internal auditors of the ministry, and they have been working with the management to deal with a number of operational issues and surrounding procurement, surrounding the management of fuels and various other things. Of course, they wouldn't have any control over the size of the staff and the appropriateness of the size, for required by the JUTC to deliver efficient service. I think I mentioned that some Services can be outsourced, some of the mechanical services, which could reduce the size of the staff. In other words, it's not a fix that it should be 4 staff per bus. It depends on how much you are doing in-house and how much you're outsourced.
What I would ask, though, PS and Mr. Abrams, is once that review is completed and we can access that report, if it could be also shared with the committee. All right? So, I mean, I know it is an ongoing. I know that audit was asked by the minister. He said it inside of this house also, that it would have been done. And I think it is of interest to the committee itself, because, you know, our interest is to ensure the efficiency of the JUTC. Not to throw blame at Mr. Abrams or PS or whoever was there before. What, as I started out by saying before, it is incumbent on us as taxpayers and as parliamentarians that subsidy from the taxpayers is used efficiently and effectively, and for the JUTC itself to be effective and efficient, that it is as a going concern to the taxpayers and to the KMTR. Right? So I'll ask for that report once it is completed. But it is taking some time, though, Mr. Abrams, that report.
The report has been complete, not the report, the audit has been complete, and I think it's back at the ministry at this present time.
Okay.
For their analysis of it.
So anytime now, no problem.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, might I just make a recommendation also?
Before you, there was Mr. Stewart.
Member Stewart, sorry.
Just shifting the question a little bit away from the accountability section there. But there has been a concern for some time now as it relates to the Jamaica building downtown, which was acquired.
That's a different Transport Authority. Let us just wrap up with JUTC first, and then we can go ahead.
Thank you. So I think it's safe for us to conclude, Mr. Abrahams, that the two most pressing issues that affect your efficiency, one, spare parts and the lack thereof or the failure to acquire, and two, improper usage of fluids, lubricants, etc., which you've indicated. You're now the result of which is now causing engine damage, transmission damage, and so forth. So you now have to be replacing or parking buses otherwise. Who are the persons, who are the managers responsible for whether it's a spare parts unit or a lubricating unit, etc.? Because at some point, when you look at accountability, if it is that going forward you find that you have 100 buses which are parked, and is it a question that these persons are not doing their job, or is it that the parts are not available, or is it that we have to now find other providers, look at other parts in the world to try and get these spare parts? If these persons are not doing their jobs, then we, the taxpayers, we must demand that they either resign or that they're fired. Because what you need to make the bus company more efficient, you also need an effective team working with you, responsible persons. It can't just be that we have one department, which, 10 persons could work in the department, but that department has 35 persons. Or if it is that we need 2,000 persons, but we have 2,500 persons working, because every single dollar that we have to pay as taxpayers, we must be getting the resultant benefit. And if it is that we don't have enough buses, we can't acquire new buses, and the reason why we can't spend money to acquire new buses is because we have to be rebuying parts or searching for parts or fixing engines and fixing transmissions, then that's a strain to the public purse that is not, that ought not to be tolerated.
That's not the reason why you're not buying buses, because you have to buy parts.
Well, exactly. So we can't buy the buses because we're buying parts, but because of the servicing. So if we can limit the maintenance of the buses, if we can limit the maintenance, then certainly we can go forward with a proper fleet that is more effective. So we can look at that as well.
The engineering department is a key component of the JUTC. That is where the whole issue of reliability starts. If we're short of parts, it's a major issue. The JUTC's entire operation is predicated on rollout. Once buses roll out, revenue is generated. Once buses do not roll out, we have a major issue for revenue, which we are already struggling with right now. So when we have a number of buses that are down for major repairs or minor repairs, lack of spare parts, etc., it does have a compounding effect on the company. But engineering is the critical component of the bus company.
Well, my final question on this point, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Abrams, could you just indicate 3 things that you will be doing to ensure that your engineering department is being run efficiently, to ensure that we have the proper number of buses to be rolled out, to ensure that we, the public, are getting the service and that JTC is getting that much needed revenue, which would also limit what the government would have to supplement? Can you just indicate for us 3 things that you will be doing to make JTC effective going forward?
I would say the first thing has to be our maintenance department, which is key to the operation. As I said before, if buses do not roll out, everything goes awry from there. The second thing is we have to ensure that when we are on the road, that we stay out in a reliable way so we can move the commuters. Once we are not on the road, the competitive factor comes in. And the second thing, which is key, the third thing would be to ensure that we control our accident situation, which deals with personal injuries, etc. That is also a very serious component. And I would say the fourth one would be that we are heavily moving towards our customer service right now. So reliability is key, customer service, maintenance, and to ensure that we stay out on the road with reliable buses.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask one simple question, and I'll.
Right. I think we
Mr. Abrahams, as part of your you gave us a figure of somewhere in the region of $831 million, the cost of accidents and so on. I take it you're self-insured.
Yes, we are self-insured.
And has any assessment been done as to whether it would be more cost-effective to approach an insurer or a group of insurers who would take on the coverage, the risk? Because it seems an enormous figure. And in that arena, I'm not sure if you've ever done the analysis as to what it is that has to be done to reduce the level of accidents. Because I suspect the $831 million that you are speaking to really deals with situations where the JUTC has accepted liability or has been found to be liable in the courts. So have you done that kind of an analysis?
We have done analysis to the point to try to engage insurance companies for insurance. Unfortunately, because of the history and track record of the company, it is proving to be very, very expensive.
Let me just point you to page 5. There's a insurance claims payable of $1.4 billion that is to be paid out by the JUTC. Historically, the JUTC, because of cash flow challenges, have not been able to pay out as the need or as required by them. Hence, you have a $1.4 billion payable here. Now, it has been a long-standing issue with the JUTC and how quickly these claims are played out. You have seen in the past where persons have threatened to seize the buses as a rolling stock to make claim or to be able to get paid. So, you know, this in itself is an issue and that is why we talk about efficiencies. One, the subvention coming from central government is given depending on the cash flow of the central government from Ministry of Finance also. If the fare box is low, it their inability to take care of even some of their monthly expenses become challenging. And that is why we speak about the readiness and the availability of the rolling stock, not just parts in itself. The parts in itself is one issue in having the availability of parts. But you cannot operate a bus system as we are now with an aging fleet as it is now. Right? So it comes back to my point that is a policy decision that the permanent secretary and the CEO is not able to answer by itself. But it is what we say from also recommended our report to the Parliament in the state of affairs of the JUTC. And I always recommend to members that when we do table the reports in Parliament, instead of we just saying aye and allow the reports to just be passed, is that we are able to debate the reports to force the point that we keep making inside of these committees. But it is the policymakers who sit on the government side also that we have to ensure that they themselves understand what these agencies and departments are going through. Right?
Chairman, but I think there is embedded in that is an issue which we certainly want to have resolved, and we can make some recommendations on. If we're incurring, liability, where the drivers are involved, it would seem to point to either lack of training or otherwise. I can't speak to what it is, and you would have to break it out into its, several components. But it seems like an enormous sum to be paying out. And I really, if you have decided, either on your own or the court has decided that you're liable, it does speak to some issue, an underlying issue, which may involve training or faults with the buses themselves, and certainly we would have to deal with those.
All right, just one.
Chairman, just one clarification. The 1.4 that is listed here, that is a provision going back from 2009. We have settled out of that provision 300 million.
Good. That is good to know. At least some payments are being made.
I've been turning around in my mind this whole thing about the self-insurance, and following on the question my colleague raised about the economic efficiency of the self-insurance as against the getting insurance company. Because one another issue, is a more moral one for me, Chair. If the JUTC is involved in an accident and is liable with a Jamaican out there, they expect settlement. You mentioned about 2009, this is 2017. That's 8 years later. The injured party is suffering for 8 years without any settlement. Mm-hmm. I know who's doing that to him, the state. Mm-hmm. It's bad and not so bad when he's a private person. But when the state is being unfair to a Jamaican citizen, it hurts more. Because the state you expect to protect you. And this now is the state is the source of your discomfort and your annoyance and your sufferation and all of that. So I think it's something that if we're going to self-insure, we have to make provision to settle the things that we are liable for. The ordinary Jamaican people can't grow up every day, live every day, feel that the state is unfair to them or will be unfair to them. It undermines government, whoever is in Jamaica House. The ordinary person must feel that he's going to be treated fairly. When him go to a private insurance company and can't get fair settlement, he going to come to us, government. But we are just as bad, because we're not settling. In instance, maybe even worse. 2009 to 2017, and it's 1.something billion, and we're less than,
Yeah, Chairman, let me just follow up on.
I have a personal
on what my friend.
Yeah, go ahead.
Member Jackson has said. It's unfortunate because if my understanding is correct, it suggests that I saw what appears to be a cabinet decision, which goes back to, I think, 2012, where the cabinet then made a decision to grant an exemption from the provisions of the motor vehicle third-party insurance, and which allows the JUTC to operate outside of those provisions. It's perhaps time, for, as my friend has said, for us to revisit it, because the motor vehicle third-party provisions speaks to every public passenger vehicle should have insurance. And insofar as I know, the JUTC is not an insurance company. But that decision was taken then. It perhaps was not the wisest decision to have been taken. But that is the space that we are operating in. And it's perhaps time to relieve JUTC of that burden and to have them operate within the ambit of the law.
I guess
Just an extension. And in this case, we really want to single out JUTC because there are many other government entities that are self-insured. And when you sue, is the Attorney General and the Accountant General that is liable. But I believe, Mr. Chair, as a country, if we make the analytical assessment that it is not in the best interest to engage the insurance company, let us use a general pool, right, of all government entities
fund,
that are going to be self-insured and how it's going to be settled. Now, the Attorney General and the Accountant General, claims are those are on them or on the consolidated fund. And so you make the provision in the budget to settle these. But the bottom line is that when a person have an accident with the government, right, they must be settled expeditiously once you come to an agreement as to who is liable and what the extent of the liability is. I know get dragged out.
I think we can also highlight that instance in the report.
In the report, we should put that.
Yes, and submit.
Member Jackson said exactly what it is that I was going to indicate. I was explaining to Member Jackson that I myself have been in a situation where parked at the stoplight, I was hit by a vehicle belonging to the government. And 7 or 8 years later, I was getting half the settlement and was told in no uncertain terms, if you don't take it, you have nothing to get. So I believe even at the portion of what third party would give you, that we should be able to protect those members of the public who, through no fault of their own and who pay their taxes, we need to ensure that they're in a position that if they have an incident, they're able to get redress and get it within a short time, not 7 years.
Good. Member Stewart.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to the PS. The Honourable Minister spoke in this House about a pilot project as it relates to LNG, shifting from diesel to LNG. Where is that project? And are you still pursuing it? Is the ministry still going to pursue that LNG project for the use in the buses?
Yes, the ministry, along with the JUTC, are looking at some proposals in that regard and is now preparing something to go to cabinet. We have also done some consultations with other stakeholders on the matter. And even last week, there was a seminar workshop on the use of natural gas as a fuel in Jamaica. And we are informed by that the IDB actually did a study on the JUTC in terms, and they looked both at retrofitting existing buses as well as the introduction of new buses with LNG. The figures seem favorable, and we are actually preparing something to go to the cabinet shortly.
All right. Just finally, I think we need to move on. Jace, in your expenses, the SCT, on fuel. Some 80, is this a monthly, this is what it costs the JUTC monthly? I'm seeing a figure here of 80,389,000. Page 8 of your report.
Mr. Abrams, can you speak to that?
Yes, that is correct. 80 million SET and ad valorem
And ad valorem on a monthly basis.
on a monthly basis
And how is this dealt with? How is this expense dealt with?
through the ministry.
And is it current or
Yes, it is current.
it's current now?
It is current.
All right. All right, members, is there any other questions for the JUTC? None? Can we just move on to the Transport Authority? Sorry? Yeah. Yes, I won't stop you from going. We don't want the buses to stop running. Thanks, Mr. Abrams, you and your team. Any opening statement from Transport Authority?
Good afternoon, Chairman and the rest of the committee. The Transport Authority was established about 30 years ago, and the primary objective was to, still is, to issue licenses as part of its regulatory framework, monitor and enforce public passenger vehicles. We currently operate throughout the entire country. There are four regions that we have: the KMTR, the SRO, which is the Southern Regional Office, the Western Regional Office, and the Northeast Regional Office. We currently employ approximately 390 staff members, and we operate on a shift system as it relates to the operation department between the hours primarily of say 6 a.m. until about 8 o'clock at night. The Transport Authority currently is undergoing a number of structural changes. We have recognized that there are a number of concerns that we do have. However, we continue to play our role as regulators in the public passenger sector.
Thank you. I guess Mr. Stewart. Hold on, Mr. Stewart was before you, so let me.
Yes, my burning question had to do with the Jamaica building, which was acquired at a cost of $150 million some years ago, having spent some $200 million for security services and other services. I understand that there is a 360-degree turn in terms of not using the building anymore. What has led to that? What will you do about the situation there?
Okay. You're correct. To date, we have spent just over $200 million in relation to the Jamaica. The procurement, which was approximately $150 million, and the rest is like for administrative costs and security-related expenditure. In addition, there was some of the challenges that we do face right now because there wasn't just enough parking facility, and we were paying approximately $2,500 for a piece of property up the road just to provide parking facilities. In addition, we recognize that in order to refurbish that building, it would cost us, the provision that was made was approximately, say, just $450 million just to refurbish half of the building, about 3 stories of the building. The decision was taken that the Transport Authority at this particular point in time could not afford, right, that kind of expenditure. And as such, a recommendation was made by the board, which has been submitted to the minister to review as it relates to how the Transport Authority would have best deal with that particular entity.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Morgan, so there was no due diligence done prior to the purchase of the building to see what were you going to be using the building for? Were there enough parking spaces? All of those things. You're looking at the Transport Authority. Were you not able to take this into consideration prior to the purchase?
From the records that I have received, that I have reviewed, it became quite clear that, enough work was not done in relation to the determination or the suitability, right, of the Jamaica building for the head office. I spoke about the whole matter of parking facilities. The KCC at the time indicated that they would not give permission for that building to be utilized if there was not adequate parking. And as such, probably a quarter mile up the road, a piece of property was leased, as I said before, for about $2,500 per month, right, to provide that parking. Because, as you know, there are certain requirements as it relates to that part of it. In addition, there were certain concerns that the staff, now that we have been speaking out, that they have been saying, listen, we have some security concerns in relation to the location of the building. And if you will recall, Mr. Stewart, that even the police, I think, had a challenge in terms of accepting that building to be utilized as their head office. We had a challenge in the sense that the type of work that we do as an enforcer, the type of work that we do primarily, we would not want to subject our staff, especially inspectors, right, to that kind of environment.
May I, through you, Mr. Chair?
Before, there was
Member
Member Jackson first,
Very well.
and then, okay, go ahead. And then after Member Jackson.
Oh, that's very kind of you, sir. Mr. Morgan, you say the acquisition of the property was for somewhere in the region of $150 million? And during the current, what provision was made for security and otherwise during the current financial year?
Mr. Chairman, in relation to the question, the specific amount of money that has been allocated for this year for Jamaica building security, I'm going to try and see if I can get that just before.
When was the property acquired?
It was acquired sometime in 2014.
And you have been paying security charges since then?
We have.
Can you say how much is that you have paid over those, 2-3 years?
The bulk of the charges are the expenses that we have incurred. Let's say we have spent about 50 million or so. The bulk of it would have been as it relates to security charges.
And that, and I note your comment that based on the records, there's nothing to suggest that due diligence was done in relation to the acquisition.
I would not say that no due diligence would have been done. At the time, perhaps, but having taken responsibility since June of last year, and based on the review by the current board, we recognize that there are some shortcomings in relation to utilizing that location for head office.
And it's part of that assessment which you have done. You have determined that the building is infested with asbestos. Is that so?
That's correct.
And asbestos, insofar as we know, is one of those cancer facilitators.
The records would show so.
And did that guide the determination that the property was not fit for the occupation by your staff?
That was part of the consideration because we have seen in the past in other areas or other buildings where persons that are trying to move away from buildings that are, asbestos has been used in the past. And in addition to all of that, the cost of refurbishing would have been completely out of our our budget.
And was there a projected value on that property after you had spent the sum which was recommended?
The latest valuation we had was about 160.
All right.
160 million with a for sale value of 140 million.
Okay, thanks for that information. But what I was getting at, so the current, you're saying the current value, for sale value,
Yes.
is $160 million.
140.
140.
Yes.
So, insofar as real estate goes, you would be losing a significant percentage of the. And if we add the time value of money, there's a significant loss.
That's correct.
In the value of the property.
That's correct.
All right, let me just go back to the original question that I had asked. You are projected to spend something in the region of how many millions to rehabilitate the building?
There's a total of $450 million, I think, which was indicated to refurbish 3 floors.
3 floors.
At the time.
Right. And did the valuers say to you what the value of the building would be at the completion of those works?
No, we didn't get that information.
And where are we on the road to the sale or otherwise transfer? But by the way, may I ask, from whom was this property acquired?
It was acquired from the UDC, Urban Development Corporation.
Right. So the UDC had a lemon in its hand, and it needed to make lemonade. And insofar as you know, has anybody been charged with criminal conduct in that what I see here this afternoon is expenditure where the appropriate investigations were not done? Can you say whether or not anyone has been charged with misconduct in a public office?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
We would have to start from 2007 when the UDC bought it from the NHT. Because we started from there.
Mr. Chairman, may I just confine what I'm speaking to is the acquisition which Mr. Morgan and his entity has in fact done. So
because before you came to this house, it was an ongoing issue of 4 properties that was purchased by the UDC, that was purchased without proper due diligence. I'm not taking away from here. But you know, we have to get state agencies in ensuring that proper due diligence is
Mr. Chairman,
done.
I do
when we're doing.
But
So,
if we could just
right,
move.
so you're complete with your questions.
No.
Can I
Just
move on to
my observation is that we confine ourselves to what is before us, and I'm bothered, and since I really can't deal with the history, I'd rather take the responsibility that I have now in dealing with Mr. Morgan and his entity, and I'd certainly not want to have this entity continue to spend the kind of money it is spending on security, and what you're likely to realize is a significant depreciation in the value of this property. I think it's a waste of public funds, and it points to a level of incompetence being taken by persons who are not properly trained or have the interest of the state and the taxpayers at heart. So we really have to say now, make a very quick decision. Because if with this matter were in the private arena, and we have a board which is responsible, disposal of this waste, if I may so call it, has to take place, and take place very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in 2014, the Jamaica building is purchased from the UDC at a cost of $150 million. Who authorized the purchase of that building?
Again, in reviewing the documents, it would have been a decision taken by the board of directors.
Then the board of directors then sitting. Okay, who was chairman of that board?
The chairman of the board then was Mr. Norton Hines.
Okay, very well. And that board approved this $150 million purchase. Now, as I understand it, this was a part of some IMF. Explain to me the role of the IMF in all of this. Something about the UDC had to offload 20% of his assets, or something to that effect. Was that a part of it, or no?
I'm not in a position to state.
You're not in a position to say. All right, very well. So you mentioned security costs, and on average, you're spending what exactly? How many millions of taxpayers' dollars to secure an unoccupied building per annum?
I don't have the stated figures here just now, but of the 50 million that we would have spent in addition to the 150,
right,
the bulk of it would have been security.
The bulk of it have been security. All right, very well. So let's say we're spending about 40 million Jamaican taxpayers' dollars to secure a building that is infested with asbestos and where rats and pigeons live. Is that correct? I understand it's infested with rats and pigeons. So we're paying some 40 million Jamaican dollars to secure a building that is asbestos infected and which is inhabited by rats and pigeons.
We are paying some money for security.
So, Mr. Morgan, I find it absolutely ludicrous that the people in Jamaica should be hearing that their taxpayers' money, when we need monies to add on to a little education program, add on to a little program for the elderly, add on to a little program for unattached youth, add on to a little program for persons living with disabilities. You know, I mean, I am the member of parliament for a constituency that we have so many impoverished communities, and I have mothers coming to me every single day, boy, Mr. Terrelang, beg you look for something because I can't afford the food for send the people to go to school. And we are providing security for rats, pigeons, and asbestos. I have a problem with that, Mr. Morgan. Where are we with divesting this absolutely ridiculous purchase, this building that solves no purchase to the Transport Authority and certainly not to the people of Jamaica? Where are we with divesting this building? Make it come off of the books, get rid of it. Where are we in that process?
There are some entities which have expressed an interest, and the board has made a decision or made a recommendation to the minister in relation to whatever we need to get rid of this building, because it is quite clear it is not in keeping with our expectations that we're going to have our staff within that particular location.
I'm sorry, I don't believe you have answered my question with respect, Mr. Morgan.
The matter is before the minister.
The matter is before the minister. Yes. So do we have an offer? That's a sale starts with its offer acceptance. Do we at least have an offer?
There are some requests that have been placed before the minister by the board.
No, because when I speak to the minister, because I will make inquiries, I want to know, do we have an offer? You say that the present market value of the building that you purchased 3 years ago at 150 million, the present market value is now 140 with a for sale of what again?
No.
Right, a market of 160 and a for sale of 140.
That's correct.
There you go. Yes, figures I
know you're not so good.
No, actually, I'm very good. I remember the figures. Figures and dates I recall. So, yes, so 160, 140, yes. 3 years later, and as Member Campbell indicated, clearly that's a significant loss in terms of real estate, because usually real estate is supposed to appreciate somewhere in the region of 7 to 15% per annum. I do real estate also as a part of my legal practice, so I'm aware. So now, looking at this loss, do we have an offer anywhere in the region of, let's say, 100 million to 140 million? Because you're speaking in a very nebulous manner, and I want the people of Jamaica to understand exactly what you're saying. And if I'm having a difficulty, then certainly perhaps our viewers and listeners are also having a difficulty. So without being nebulous, sir, what is the figure that we have from these offers or these things on the table that you've spoken about? Anywhere between 100 and 140, 80 to 140 perhaps, Mr. Morgan?
It all depends on the terms of arrangement or agreement or what would have been submitted, because it may not necessarily, what we have is from the UDC, because we were told.
From the UDC? So the UDC wants to repurchase the building that they sold?
No.
Oh,
the
sorry.
UDC gave us a specific time frame with which to dispose of the property, or to sorry, not to dispose of, but to upgrade the property. Right now we have a letter.
Let's forget upgrading, because we're looking at $450 million, which we don't have for
That's
the
correct.
refurbishment. So forget that. We're
Right.
talking about offloading, sell it to somebody
no,
else.
but let me ask you, so the building has not been fully paid for as yet?
The building has been paid for.
Fully paid for?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
That's
Yes.
been paid for.
No, but then how is it that the UDC is now dictating on the time frame of refurbishing?
No, prior to, because we had to write off a sizable amount of our books for last financial year, right? Now, a part of the agreement with the UDC was that that the Transport Authority would be required to upgrade the building within a specific time frame. That didn't materialize, and as such, they have given us a letter to say that, listen, you don't have to, we're not going to hold it to this particular time frame. So the truth is that we are not necessarily may not necessarily have to be selling the building. It could be a lease arrangement. It could be different types of arrangement being put in place. And as I said before, there are options that have been placed before the board, and they have made
recommendations to the minister.
But you see, Mr.
So it
Morgan,
is-
sorry, Mr. Chair.
So, in essence, the board, there may be an option of not selling, there may be an option but then it comes back to the same refurbishing cost.
Yes. And again, it all depends on what the options are, because one would expect that a proper evaluation would have been done, so that at the end of the period, what would this really mean for the Transport Authority? Because at this particular point, as an asset, because we don't have the money to refurbish that building, which will probably run close. The latest figure I've heard would be the entire building would probably cost about $1 billion to refurbish it alone. The Transport Authority doesn't have that kind of money.
Mr. Morgan, with respect, sir, you do not have an asset on your hand. You have a liability. It's not an asset. It's a liability, sir. So, again, you see, you made certain indications in a very nebulous manner. In seeking to clarify, you've now put two scenarios on the table. You've put one, the question of a sale, and you've put two, the question of a lease. With respect to Mr. Morgan, I don't understand exactly what the board is thinking, or whoever heads Transport Authority, but as it relates to...
Remember, to protect Mr. Morgan, Mr. Morgan is not the chairman of the board or even can direct the board in that manner. So, as Mr. Morgan has indicated, that the board has sent a recommendation to the minister, and I think, with all due respect, we need to allow the minister to at least make a decision on that. So just to protect Mr. Morgan.
That's quite fine. No, Mr. Managing Director, one second. Mr. Managing Director, I understand that you're here, but you see, Mr. Managing Director, please, I no way intend to make you feel as if you need protection at all. It's just that you have said two things, and I like to be clear. So forgive me. Perhaps also let me take off my teacher voice and do another voice then for you. Mr. Morgan, you have indicated, sir, firstly, that the board looking at options, but based on what you had said, or based on the trend of the discussion, one would have thought that those options related to the sale of the building, because as is, the building is a liability. In answer to the chairman just now, you elucidated two positions. One, the possibility of a sale, and two, the possibility of a lease. What I'm positing, Mr. Morgan, is that in the event the Transport Authority, whether by its management staff, you being the managing director, or the board, etc., if they opt to pursue that course of leasing the building, then I would presume that they would have to renovate the building to make it tenantable. So they would renovate it to make sure that whosoever is coming to occupy lease it, or perhaps they could enter into maybe, I don't know, maybe they're entering a peppercorn lease where they're saying, okay, well, you come in and you renovate, and once again, Mr. Morgan, I see you smiling, you come in, you renovate, but then you don't pay nothing, because guess what's going to happen now? The cost that you've paid to renovate is really supposed to be the rental, so you're still in a position where Transport Authority is still carrying this liability and there's still no income being generated. So I mean, so if you could explain to us at what point, because I don't want you see, Mr. Chairman, what I don't want is for next year. Next year, we have the Transport Authority before us again, Mr. Chairman, and we're discussing a 2004, exactly. So 2014 acquisition is still before the PAC in 2018, and then 2019 we're still here saying, boy, you know, I mean, Mr. Chairman, we don't recoup the money yet, you know, because, well, based on the lease agreement with whosoever came in, they had to tear it down and so forth. So we're looking at, I mean, something that looks like the toll agreement, where we're not seeing any money.
Member. Let me
yes, for some years to come. So please, can we just get that kind of clarification? Thank you.
Time is against us. Yes, you wanted to.
Now, just pointing out that a recommendation has come from the Transport Authority to the Minister, and the Ministry is packaging it in a Cabinet submission, which the Minister hopefully will, if he supports it, will take it to Cabinet shortly. We're expecting it to go to Cabinet within a couple of weeks, and a lot of the issues that the member addressed in terms of the continuing liability of the Transport Authority is being addressed in that once the property goes to the new occupant, the Transport Authority would stop spending immediately. They wouldn't be spending on security or any.
But in the meantime,
yes,
Mr. Morgan,
he has that.
Your current facility, as it is now, is inadequate.
Yes, Chairman, it is.
And what is being done now, since we have taken the decision of not occupying the Jam and Tell building, or is it that we're waiting to dispose of, or whatever decision made already, that you're looking at an alternative location for the Transport Authority? Because even though you mentioned inadequate parking down on Duke Street, where you are now is even worse than Duke Street would have been.
I wouldn't say so, Chairman. However, just to answer your question.
Worse when licensing time comes.
We have been managing as best as we can.
On the sidewalk.
Well, you know, that is part of what, you know, we would not like to have continued, you know, and that is why I think the requirement or the request to have a more, you know, spacious facility to address the needs of the Transport Authority and its customers at any point in time of the year is one of which we are still looking at. And I know the board is currently, speaking of the chairman specifically, is that we would want to put a search out for any possibilities that may come along for a new head office.
Mr. Chair, every time I hear about a new place for a government facility, some time ago, in the previous,
Administration.
not the previous president, when Bruce was Prime Minister, Miss Patricia, what's her name? McCullough, was heading a unit, the modernization unit in the office of the Prime Minister. And there were two particular, but there are two particular objectives. And that is to consolidate government services, to avoid replication, and two, the utilization of buildings. And if my recollection is correct, there's supposed to be an inventory of government buildings around. And in order to optimize government expenditure, when government need an office, that's the first place to go. So my question, Chairman, P.S., have you looked into that inventory to see if it can satisfy any of the buildings available that can satisfy Transport Authority, rather than making expenditure on privately owned properties that is going to fetch market prices and cost the government coffers more than what is necessary. So have you looked in that direction?
Well, I'm familiar with that particular inventory. When I was in the previous ministry, we were working closely with the Public Sector Transformation Unit, and in particular, there have been offices that exist that government entities could look at, but there was also a considerable amount of rental that is being paid by some government ministries and government entities that far exceeded the available built facility. A lot of the built facilities are old and need rebuilding. For instance, 2 Hagley Park Road is one considerable facility that the ministry, Commission of Land owns, that the ministries have not been able to use, and the ministries that have evacuated that facility actually end up paying billions of dollars over the last 12 to 15 years that they have evacuated that facility, but the facility is there. In terms of the Jamintel building, the proposal that is before us also will see the refurbishment of the facility at considerable cost, but with a view, Mr. Morgan expressed concern about the area, and it is felt that the development of government square or circle, government facility around Hero Circle will significantly enhance the area itself and the security, and that the facility, when it is developed, will form, will merge with Government Square.
That's why I was thinking of the same thing, because coming on your comment, Mr. Morgan, because if that proposal for that general area to be built out into government offices, then how is it now we're saying that it is that particular building now is not going to is adequate enough to be built down on Duke Street, So it takes away from that complete project that has been proposed in the government circle, and but there's a greater issue though, PS and members, of how it is that we treat in these assets, because some of them you just have to write off. Yeah? And that particular building, I remember NHT bought it, then UDC bought it, now Transport Authority, and it has been just sitting there as a non-performing asset of the government and different agencies. Yeah? I remember there were 4 properties that were purchased by UDC prior to this, that was sitting down for years, that had to be offloaded at a loss. And it is a wider issue, members, of how it is that, and it is something I think that needs to be looked at, because you will have non-performing assets that you may just need to divest to the private sector. Or we're going to need parking space downtown, But it is because it is a cost to the public purse on these non-performing assets. I want to ask you, Mr. Morgan, in the discussion that we had a while ago with the JUTC on license being given to operators to operate on the same routes as JUTC, how many new licenses have been issued, if you can give us the information, in the last year and a half, last 18 months? Additional road license.
And you speak specifically of the KMTR, or just generally?
Well, you can break it down. Give me the KMTR separate from island-wide.
Okay, let me just speak specifically to the KMTR. And I know one of the concerns that you have raised, Chairman, is in relation to licenses being issued to operators, public passenger. And we speak primarily here of PPVs and not commercial carriers, right?
Public passenger, yes.
Right. A total of approximately 55,000 licenses so far for this year has been generated with island-wide. Within the KMTR, just over approximately 29,000 has been issued, minus the commercial cars, about 20,000.
No, man, we're talking about
Public passenger
Public
vehicles.
passenger.
Yeah, I'm just going through the numbers here. About 9,000 has been offered in the KMTR in relation to that. We have issued licenses in relation to hackney carriages. There are some rural stage licenses that we have issued in the KMTR, and some additional route taxes. As you know, the route taxes, though, are primarily in the rural areas. But there are about 3 or 4 routes in the KMTR which we offer this kind of a service.
So you're saying about 9,000. This is new, not the
No,
existing.
overall.
No, and I'm trying to differentiate from new to what is overall. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at last year versus.
Okay. Last year in the KMTR, a total of 8,000 licenses. So I would say approximately 1,000 new licenses were issued in the KMTR this year. The bulk of which would have been hackney carriage licenses.
And you have, and how many, because you made a policy shift of having rural terminating in the KMTR or being able to drop off and pick up in the KMTR. How many additional?
No, not drop off and pick up, Chairman. We have made a policy shift in relation to highest buses that usually terminates at Spanish Town. And, you know, as you're aware, we made that decision based on the concerns that were expressed by the commuters, because most of those persons coming from the rural areas and they take the highest buses and terminate in Spanish Town, most of them want to go on to Kingston, come into Kingston. So that was one of the main reasons why we decided that after doing our survey that we would offer that kind of facility. In addition, we recognize that the persons, apart from the inconvenience of stopping in Spanish Town and taking another vehicle to come into Kingston, they would have to pay an additional fare.
Yeah, but I don't think it was fully thought out, though, with the Water Lane and the Darling Street facility.
That in itself, Chairman, we had some challenges, as you're aware, and we looked at the location, Darling Street versus Water Lane, and we recognized that there were more spaces at Water Lane than at Darling Street.
Agreed.
Right.
But when you have how many more? About an additional 300.
Approximately 300.
Approximately
Yes.
300.
Yes.
Terminating in the KMTR.
Yes.
I mean, that's an additional 300 on top of the congestion that you would have already had at Darling Street. You know, and I know that the Water Lane is an additional expense to the Transport Authority. One, as Member Terrelong speaks about security and just the maintenance of that facility. And I mean, from day one, we have been saying that that facility was constructed without the thought of how it is that the commuters would even reach to the facility. So that in itself is an issue. But to take it on as a going interest without having that due diligence or even the marketing done in how it is that we're going to get commuters to use it, much less the buses themselves, is an issue. Yeah? And that's why I said that having that additional 300 terminate in the KMTR without resolving that issue of the congestion happened before it should have, before dealing with that. You know, so what is the solution now?
But just to back up a bit, in relation to the congestion of which you speak, that is exactly why the Water Lane facility was chosen, because we recognize that Darling Street would have been would have been a serious challenge. So we thought that utilizing the water lane facility would have assisted.
Agreed, but I'm saying you put the cart before the horse, because you took control of the location without determining or that the passengers would actually use it. No, you had to abandon that, be it in the short term or forever. But you have expenses that will. It's better it had stayed with UDC than the Transport Authority taking on that.
Well, again, to be honest with you, that was a decision that was taken a few years ago in relation to the Transport Authority taking over the water lane facility. And it's something that we plan to have further discussion with the UDC.
No, the UDC built it for them. The $426 million was spent by UDC to build that center. It was for the Transport Authority.
It was a KCC.
No, I'm
UDC. KCC,
no,
and what happened when UDC build it, they get have it on their hand and it's not being used. That's the background to it. But if I may, Mr. we have to just make some hard decision. Nobody not going down that place. Because no passenger going to stop there when what life is down there for them. They can't connect to nowhere. That's not where they're coming to. They're coming to many other places downtown or elsewhere in Kingston to connect. Is it that other buses are going to connect them to take them to halfway through New Kingston or wherever else? If that is not the case, nobody not going down there. It's a white elephant. Let's face it. And we're going back and forth with this thing. It is over, out, nobody not going down there. Bus operators not going down there, passengers not going down there. So it's a fooling ourselves that telling we're going to send roads from through Spanish Town to come there. The history is there. No, the buses that used to stop in Spanish Town, being able to come in here from wherever else, they're not going there. We have the evidence come here year after year. Just make up a mind that it was a bad decision, money wasted, what else it can be used for.
And we're shifting non-performing assets between different
turn it
agencies
into a
and
market
ministries.
or something else, but abandon this transport business. It don't work. Both administrations have had it.
True.
To deal with it. Don't work. We're fooling ourselves. And use it for something else. Advertise it and say what you want to use it for. Earn a little money from it so you can stop paying for security down there, because we're wasting taxpayers' money. Every day we're spending money for security down there that not earning us nothing. Advertise it. Make people make proposals to use it for something. And accept that we make a bad decision. We wasted some money when we spent the 400 and something million so many years ago to build it. So let's move on.
So that's why I'm asking him now, asking Mr. Morgan, now that that facility is not adequate for what it is that you...
The Transport Authority is currently looking and in the position, and we want to make a recommendation, because if you're familiar with the Darling Street, Pigeon Street facilities, they are literally back to back, right? Mm-hmm. However, there are some properties which are nearby, and this is one of the proposals that the Transport Authority will be making to the board quite shortly. Because we recognize, and think this is the third attempt that had been made in relation to the utilization of the water lane.
3 strikes and you're out.
The water lane facility, right? So having recognized that this has been the third attempt, and there are some considerations that have to be taken put in place. We are looking at some possibilities with respect to the Pigeon Street, Darling Street facility.
Okay.
That's just to answer your question. But that's basically where we are.
How do you manage now those additional 300 vehicles terminating at the Darling Street?
It's a challenge, sir. It is really a challenge. Yeah. It's really a challenge.
Can you furnish us then with the amount of license that has been offered in the last 18 months, and how many of them have been taken up? And can you break it down into parishes for us also?
While Mr. Morgan contemplates the answer, I want to answer this. What the criteria to get a license? Many persons out there want a license, feel like they have to have connection. Tell the public, if John Brown, if Fitzjackson, who lose his seat and want to run a public passenger vehicle and to make what do I need to do? What that John public need to do? Because I am a little distressed, Chairman, when you have a state service and you have to have connection to get it, and then who have connection get and who don't have connection don't get. You know, part and Mr. Terrelong can get a dozen because he is Terrelong. But if you don't have any connection,
my uncle would like one, and my uncle doesn't have one because I don't have no connection. So I don't know what connections you're talking about.
You cut that
but
out.
not
You
even
will
my
connect.
not even my uncle has one.
Members.
Even my uncle has one.
But seriously, no, Mr.
no
Morgan,
connections.
just tell us in answering the chairman, how does an ordinary Jamaican who want to get a
It's really a very simple exercise, Mr. Jackson. It's very simple.
and they treated fairly equally like everybody else?
It's a simple exercise in which you can visit our website, first and foremost, and you'll see the information. No, I'm serious. Believe me. I'm going to answer your question directly, you know, because it's a concern of ours, to be honest with you. You can visit our website, or you can walk into any transport authority facility and make a request as to how, what type of license, you know, what you apply for, how do you go about applying for it. I'm not saying like in any institution there might not be any inconsistencies, and this is something that we have heard. But one thing I can say to the public, and we have been saying to the public, you don't have to have an inside connection to get a license. You don't have to. Because, as I just said before, you can just walk into any of our facilities, or you can go to our website and you can make the application. If it's a green plate, you can make an application online. If it's a red plate, you can come straight to any of the offices, and then there's a process.
I hear you, and I like that. I want to juxtapose that question with the questions being asked earlier about the number of licenses being granted. It has come up here before. Do we have too much taxis on the road in certain routes? Do we have too much minibuses on certain routes? I know that there are some minibus route that is preferred. They are the one with the high volume, and you have a lot of operators want to go there, and there's some which you beg people to go and they're not going, right? So there can be an oversubscription. How the process works in terms of you getting to go on certain routes or not, given the fact that, you know, some taxi man probably can't make any money because there's too much taxi already on it. So in order to make it a profitable thing, you probably want to set a limit. So against that, those limits that might exist, how you go about, my first question, granted a license to go on particular routes? Okay.
We have a survey department, a research department, which conducts surveys on a regular basis. So, for example, the last major survey we did within the KMTR was about 2015. Based on the findings, because what you look for, because you have new developments as it relates to communities, schools, et cetera, working environment and all of that. Access to roadways, things like those. So they would do their research and determine how many seats would be needed to adequately serve a particular environment. They would also map out a particular route from point A to point B, and it would be dependent on the requirement, meaning the number of commuters. From that now, they would make a recommendation. They do their analysis, and then they would make a recommendation in relation to the number of seats that would make it a viable, proposition for an investor. Once they have done that, and they have made that recommendation to the Transport Authority, that matter would have gone before the committee, the licensing committee, which is usually chaired by the chairman of the authority. And there will be some discussions, and then there will be some approval as it relates to the number of seats that will be allocated to any particular route or any location. Based on that now, they would advertise. And depends on the type of license. Persons would then make their application.
Stop there, Mr. Morgan, please. So when you last advertised, how many places did you advertise for? How many openings did you advertise for?
You spoke about the last, say,
Yeah, well,
18
give me last year. Because you, obviously, you put out more than one.
Approximately 7,000.
7,000. Seat, well, license.
No, licenses.
License. That's
For the
island-wide.
Island-wide.
Yeah. And how many of those have been taken up?
Approximately 45% of that.
45%.
Approximately, yes.
And that's island-wide.
Island-wide, which comprises road taxes,
and you said the last survey was done in 2015. Has one been done since?
For the KMTR.
For the KMTR?
Yes.
Because let us use one of the more profitable routes for the JUTC, which is the Washington Boulevard. There are more taxes on that than you have JUTC buses now. Yeah? And I question if there is even a conversation being had with the JUTC, which is a JUTC route, a conversation being had with the JUTC on the viability of the route, of the routes. One, on how many licenses are offered on those routes compared to what can be provided by the JUTC. Because if the fare box of the JUTC keeps reducing because more seats are being added to the routes, which are not JUTC buses, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem. And I mean, I remember I was rubbished by yourself and Mr. Abrahams when I made a press release about the 6,000. You don't remember? All right.
I don't recall
I was
you being
mischievous.
Chairman.
Mischievous when I said that over 6,000, an offer for 6,000 licenses was put out there.
In the KMTR? That's
No,
what
I said island-wide. It cannot be for the KMTR. We're not that stupid. Island-wide. Because even routes in my own constituency, Mandeville to Mile Gully, that even can't even take one more vehicle on it, was even opened. That has not been opened for years. So I question what would instruct the Transport Authority, right? Hence why we're seeing chaos on the road now. I couldn't tell last day I see one of your teams out there. But it's chaos on the road. And that's why I ask in the question, what would have directed? Because these licenses, not just, you said the survey was done in the KMTR, but you have issued or for offer 7,000 additional licenses.
But Chairman, may I just
Chairman, can I just seek some clarification from Mr. Morgan? Those licenses in KMTR, are they sub-licenses to the JUTC?
No.
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 And they operate on JUTC routes?
The licenses those licenses which are issued to the operators outside of JUTC, you're saying that JUTC has nothing to do. It doesn't grant approval to any sub-licenses.
If I may answer it this way. Just under 700 Hackney carriage licenses were offered on the basis that there are a number of taxi companies had written to the Transport Authority over the period indicating that they were actually using white plates in their fleets. We had many discussions with them, and we thought it was prudent to review, considering that Hackney carriage licenses had not been offered in the KMTR for a number of years. We did not want them to continue to utilize.
And those Hackney carriage licenses are running like, well, you call them route taxes or what? Because there is an influx, not only in taxi carriage that we're seeing out there. We're talking about just regular route taxes. Huh? There is, I mean, you see it on the road.
Well, I do agree with you, Chairman, that some of those licenses that were given for persons to operate as Hackney carriages they're not operating within the context. I'll agree with that. In relation to route taxes, there are not many because route taxes are limited to Maxwell Avenue to Halfway Tree, Jonestown to downtown, Chisholm Avenue to downtown.
So where, and let's go back to the Washington Boulevard then. Yeah? What would then cause that increase of taxes on that route if...
Let me explain by saying this. When we did that survey in 2015, there are some hotspots that the Transport Authority survey recognized. For example, you spoke about the Duane Park to Halfway Tree, 3 miles to Halfway Tree to Papine. We have shared that information with the JUTC. We have made it quite clear to them, right, that based on our findings, we made some suggestions in relation to how they should utilize their they could utilize their services. We have even went as far as to make recommendations in relation to say, listen, offer route taxi services in the hills. Offer a combination of not just those, like the P6 buses, but offer a combination of different types of licenses within the KMTR. We made that recommendation to them. We recognize, right? We recognize that there are a number of deficiencies in terms of the operations of the JUTC. And it's not for us really just to address that here. However, the taxi companies, the main reason why we issued some of those Hackney carriage licenses was just to facilitate those Hackney companies that have not had any licenses for years.
That's 700 out of 7,000.
Okay. In relation to the rural areas, though, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we did, we recognized that there are a number of licenses that have been surrendered. There are a number of licenses that have been surrendered over the years. We did a review, and we found that there are licenses that were surrendered. Now, in order for us to ensure that the commuters are taken care of, we reoffered or reissued those licenses once we are satisfied within ourselves. So a substantial portion of that had to do with licenses that have been surrendered, and also surveys that were done, for example, in Montego Bay, in Clarendon, which shows there has been a growth and there are developments, and there are incremental amounts of licenses that we have been issuing. So not every single one had been taken up, as I said before, but just around 40-45%, I think, had been taken up. So there are still a substantial amount of licenses out there that have not been taken up. And I think, as Mr. Jackson indicated, what you find is that some persons are willing to just stay on a particular route, and there are some routes that have been left unserviced the way we'd want them to be serviced. So we are still looking at possibilities of ensuring that some of those, especially in the rural areas, are addressed, because people have to travel. And about 70% of the households in Jamaica right now have to depend on public transportation.
As a rural MP, what I would love to see, an invitation was sent out to us MPs, for rural parishes, to come and have a discussion with yourself about routes within our constituencies.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when I called, I was told that you were busy, and they would get back to me. Well, up to now, I have not gotten a call, even after trying to call back. And I think I complained to one of your
I spoke to your secretary, sir. I spoke to her, and I asked her, as soon as you're available,
no, man, I'm available anytime, man.
The Transport Authority will come in to visit
you. If you want it next week Tuesday, we can do it next week Tuesday.
Well, you can consider next week Tuesday on.
But the point I'm making is that you have many rural routes where persons have to walk for distance to even go to where the termination of the routes. Those are the ones that I would love to. And in the past, even though the consultation has been had between us and the Transport Authority, nothing happens to those additional. And I'm going to use that, like in my own constituency, Mile Gully, Ballinure, has to be serviced by white plates. It's a 5-mile walk from Ballinure, but there's nothing running between Ballinure and Mile Gully. So if they want to go to Mandeville. They'd have to take one from Ballignor to Christiana to Mandeville. Yeah?
Mr. Chairman,
When it's closer for them to come from
Where
Ballignor to
Mandeville.
Mile Gully too, and less costly.
Yes.
You know?
And you know, you're right, because we recognize, right, as part of what our outreach program, because we had written to all 63 members of parliament, advising them that we want to come and meet with them. And we have had a few consultations, right? But as I said, next week, Tuesday, we'll be contacting the office.
No problem.
Mr.
But I don't want us to just talk about it and no action.
Mr. Chair, it's a suggestion, a humble little suggestion. Your remit, Mr. Morgan, is to enable adequate public transportation throughout Jamaica. Against the background of these preferred routes and the least or very least preferred routes, for which we have people that need to move. You charge a fee annually for this license, right? You must charge something. My humble suggestion, your primary mandate is not to collect money. Your primary mandate is to regulate the movement of people throughout the country. I suggest that you identify those critical ones, probably like what Mr. Phillips was talking, and others, and do a cross-subsidy. You might have to induce people to go on some routes as not preferred by charging them little or no fee as an incentive, given that the primary mandate is to facilitate the movement of people in an economical way, because you'll have standards for the vehicles to operate. And at least you're not going to dilute the standard, but at least our people will be moved at a minimum standard for their safety and, for example, insurance and all of that that the vehicle need to have, so they'll be traveling in an insured vehicle. So I humbly suggest that those rural areas or those routes that people live on that is severely undersubscribed, because say you advertise for 7,000 and it's 40% response, 45%, 55% wasn't taken up. And obviously because it's not too attractive. But there are people living there. People need to move. Cross-subsidize it. Those who love to go the preferred route, they probably bump up the charge. A premium charge, and use that to subsidize those that you won't get any revenue on, but you have to move people. Because we want our people all over the country to have some reasonable amount of transportation at minimum standard.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Morgan, in terms of tackling the movement of our people and performance efficiency, where are we in terms of when you travel throughout, let's say Europe, America, Asia, you see bus stops. This is the age of technology. You have a particular timetable, and you'll see the digitized, bus number 83 in the next 5 minutes, bus number 86 in the next 10 minutes, and so forth. Do we have plans? And before we go into the budget, but at least have we conceptualized a plan where we actually move the transport sector in Jamaica into the modern era? Because it's not even the future, it is the modern, the present era of having our people know that, listen, this bus is coming at this time, at this particular bus stop, I now have 20 minutes to wait, and so forth, last bus at X time, and so forth. Where are we in terms of that sort of thinking to truly modernize the way we transport our people across the length and breadth of Jamaica?
The question you have asked is a reasonable one. And just suffice to say, at this particular point in time, we have to do a fair amount of work in relation to that. We do issue timetables, especially for the express carriage licenses and the 4-year rural stage licenses. However, I must say that which indicate on their licenses, stopping points and the approximate time that they should get there. But unfortunately, for one reason or another, most of the times, they are not adhered to. It is quite evident, Mr. Turlong, that the system or the sector needs to be modernized, as you rightly say. It has to be a new thinking in relation to how we approach the whole transportation sector. And one of the things that we at the Transport Authority is looking at, some possibilities, is the use of RFID, right, in terms of issuing these as part of our licensing regime to the operators, which allows us to be able to track those vehicles, and apart from tracking them, they'll be able to be easier monitored to ensure that they maintain, in terms of their operational activities on the particular route that they have been prescribed to do. So there's still a fair amount of work to be done. I mean, right now we're in the conceptualization phase, and I can say that we have a far way to go. I'll tell you that, to get to where we think we would want to be. We had a discussion yesterday with some personnel from the ministry, and also in relation to the Ministry of not only Transport and Mining, but also Works Agency, as it relates to the utilization of their wide area network that is being developed right now. And we are pretty excited in terms of saying that over the next few years, I can't really put a time on it, but we would want to move in that direction of which you speak.
Very well, thank you. And finally, going back to, you mentioned, for example, the water lane facility, etc., and there are others that Transport Authority had acquired, and they now sit as white elephants. I've been following the work of the mayor and KSAC. Have you had any discussions with them to see, well, in terms of the revolutionizing downtown Kingston, to see how best they can perhaps, you can perhaps discuss, I don't know, some sort of purchase, sale, or rental, lease, whatever. Because if it is that the plan is to revamp downtown Kingston, let downtown Kingston be now the center of Jamaica, per se, all these businesses moving down there, how can they utilize some of these spaces which are just empty, which would also see a cost benefit to you, and perhaps, again, just to make, for that more modern feel, make something out of it.
I spoke earlier about the possibility at Darling Street, Pigeon Street, and as you know, the KSAC operates, I think, both entities. And as such, we have not, as I said before, we are actually in the planning stage as to how we can utilize it, because the Darling Street, Pigeon Street, especially the Pigeon Street facility, comes readily to mind that, if you should expand it, it has great potential. And this is something that we would want to look at further.
Okay, and then finally from me, Mr. Chair, I'm cognizant of the time. Mr. PS, one of the things that we realize just from sitting here on the PAC is that there is oftentimes this swap between ministries of buildings and lands and buildings and lands, and it could be that I get the impression that a particular ministry or a particular government entity might want to increase its revenue at a particular point, so it offloads to another government ministry or another government entity or agency, etc. But there's no value to the people of Jamaica by virtue of this kind of asset swap. So it's an asset to one, a liability to one, and it makes the round. And for the last 20 years, you have empty government buildings just sitting down. You hear of, renting space uptown, etc. Empty buildings, then it swaps from one ministry to the next ministry, one agency to the next agency. And it's an endless cycle of government waste, a wanton disregard for the public purse. Do permanent secretaries meet? I know that, ministers meet in cabinet, but do permanent secretaries meet to say, well, what is happening in my ministry in particular as it relates to a particular physical asset, and how best can we say, let's look at this particular picture. What is in the best interest of Jamaica and the people of Jamaica? Do we privatize it? Do we, as opposed to offloading it from one to the next, and there's just a swap back and forth?
I think the permanent secretary has gotten just stop the question.
Thank you. Portmore member.
Ministries don't actually own buildings. The buildings are all owned by the Commissioner of Lands, but ministry occupy them from time to time. And over time, there has been very limited investment in ministry facilities by government. Very, very limited. In our case, for instance, we managed in 2003 get to spend $100+ million to build a facility for the then Ministry of Transport and Works, which was renting previously. We, the Ministry of Justice, just recently managed to get some facilities up on Constant Spring Road there, and that is rental. But there has been very, very limited investment. The only ministry that had made a substantial investment in any new facility, the only two ministries during the 20 years that I've been around are the OPM and the Ministry of Finance. But apart from, yes.
That's prior to the 20 years.
Yes, I'm not aware of the since.
No, that's what he's saying. Yeah, that's
right.
What he's saying.
And in fact, it's our ministry that provided technical services to both the OPM and the Ministry of Finance at the time when those buildings were the new block at Ministry of Finance, plus the office currently occupied by the cabinet and the cabinet office and so forth at OPM. So there has been very limited investment in that. While that is happening, some facilities have gotten old and derelict. Some facilities, for instance, owned by Ministry of Agriculture, had to be abandoned, and other facilities for some department. Facilities for some department have been built. I mentioned Ministry of Finance and some of the revenue centers and all of that. And some departments which have now become executive agencies in the Ministry of Health, like the Registrar General Department, but very, very limited investment otherwise. And over time, as was pointed out earlier, some ministries end up renting, which is unfortunate, especially the ministry that has overall responsibility for land and also for government estate, having to be renting office. It doesn't look good. And we do have some discussion, but as was said earlier as well, the Public Sector Transformation Unit was embarking on a master rationalization plan, which included a plan to reduce the amount of facilities being rented by government and also to rationalize. We have been directed now as well that we should not embark on any new plan, whether to give up facilities that we now have or to occupy, to rent, or to build our new facilities while the whole rationalization is taking place and the government circle is unfolding. So there has been a constraint imposed upon us now based on the policy directive given.
Okay.
Chairman, may I please, in relation to Mr. Morgan, I know we have this time constraint, but I noticed your records are indicating that you purchased some staff buses.
That's correct, sir.
And those buses are Chinese imports.
Golden Dragon, to be precise.
What's the capacity, the carrying capacity of those vehicles?
Sorry, could you repeat for me, sir?
What's the carrying capacity of those vehicles?
40. I think about 40 each.
40 each.
Yes.
And that's for carrying staff members?
That was the idea.
Sorry?
That was the intended idea.
What's the cost of each of these units?
Approximately 22 million.
22 million?
Yes, sir.
And when...
That's for combined or for each?
Each. 22 million each.
And when were they purchased?
They were, I think it was about July. They were paid for, I think, July of 2016.
They were paid for?
Yes.
And when did the actual purchase take place? You entered into the agreement to purchase these vehicles.
Those both, the agreement to purchase those buses, I think, was approved sometime, I think it's either 2014 or 2015, based on some agreement between the Transport Authority and the union representatives representing the workers for staff buses to be procured.
Are they being used now? Are those buses being used now?
No, Chairman, they're not being used right now.
Why?
Those buses, we have found them not to be in, based on the requirements, we have some challenges with those buses being used to carry the staff members, right? And as such, the Transport Authority has decided to dispose of them.
So you are disposing of those buses. So have you disposed of them or not, as it? Or where are you in the process of disposing of them?
We have disposed of 3 so far of the 5.
Okay. And you have replaced those with other buses?
The intention is to replace them with coaster buses.
Okay.
John, with your window, one last thing, Mr. Pierce. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Mike, please.
You spent $22 million each, and you bought 5?
That's correct, sir.
5. And and these were supposed to be placed where?
2 in the KMTR and 1 at the other regional offices.
And how were they supposed to be the operating cost for these units? How was that supposed to be dealt with?
Operating costs would be to the Transport Authority, because they would be the owners of the bus.
Yes, the Transport Authority would be picking up the tabs, because we would own the buses, you know. The buses will be owned by the Transport Authority.
Otherwise, you'd have to hire external companies to transport the workers.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
And you didn't. So you spent $110 million, right? On top of that, you have the insurance to carry and all the other costs related. So, and the life of these buses was worked out to be over what period?
Usually, I think 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years. Yes. So on average, you would be spending in the region of $30–40 million to ferry your staff around.
That's correct.
And your determination that was value for money.
Well, what we do recognize is that by nature of what we do, especially our inspectors, kind of work that we do, and I'm sure that the authority in the discussion with the unions would have recognized that persons who sometimes have to prosecute some of the same...
For the same reason why I didn't take the downtown building, because of security reasons of the same inspectors. You are putting provisions in place for their own safety to and from work.
Yes, because there, especially now, we have some concerns, especially in the western region. Persons who lives in Portmore because of not enough transport coming from that, and persons have to get to work by 6 o'clock.
But my question, the only thing, you're going to a 30-seater from a 40-seater. I mean, what would be the difference? Is it the size of the bus, or why dispose of them? Because the coasters are 30-seaters. Those that you purchase are 40-seaters. Why then dispose of them? Or why weren't they workable then? The rationale that I have here, that has been issued, basically, the units are too expensive, right, to maintain. But they were. You paid for them in June. When were they delivered? We got them in September. So then why then didn't we then stall the purchase of them then? Was there a contractual agreement for the delivery? Because before you pay for them, obviously they wouldn't have been shipped as yet. So why then pay for the buses for them to arrive in September to then now turn around and sell them? That don't make not much sense at all.
Mr. Chairman, may I just inquire as to...
Oh, let him just answer first, please.
Mr. Chairman, at the time, the 40 buses were actually being ordered between the JUTC and the Transport Authority. The JUTC are ordering 35, and those were the 35 for the JUTC were actually in the budget, and then the 5 from the Transport Authority. And the reason the Transport Authority was asked to pay upfront was to fulfill the GOJ down payment on those buses. But the decision of the Transport Authority to acquire the buses as staff buses would have predated Mr. Morgan.
No, I understand that.
It was understood that those buses, I guess because of the price and the size, might have been ideal. I know the buses came into Jamaica. They were evaluated by the JUTC, and from documents I saw, they were also evaluated by the Transport Authority.
And the JUTC seems to be happy with them.
And the Transport Authority then apparently were happy with them. But
no, the point I'm making, PS, is the new board went in when? And I'm not casting blame on former board or this board, but if you made a payment in June, knowing the supply of the buses, unless some payment is made, those buses not going to be shipped, right? Then why not then reevaluate? Because you'd have to then decide if you want those buses or not. You have paid for them. It took 3 to 4 months to get here. Then you decide to turn around and sell them. So my issue is, why then pay for them if then you decide, because you didn't make that evaluation that they're not workable when it is on sea. You would have made that evaluation before you even pay for them. You know, so it just looks a little bit messy that you spend that amount of money, then after receiving them, to decide that they were too expensive. Yeah? It just looks untidy.
Inquire as to who are the agents for those buses in Jamaica.
Agent for the buses?
Yes.
I think it's Vaughn's Motor Company.
And those are the same buses that the JUTC got that's running the Stony Hill, the hilly routes, which have worked out well enough for it's not the quality of the bus that is in question, really. It is just, no, I'm just making that point. It is not the quality, but Mr. Morgan is saying that it is not watch the size
it's
that
not
you want.
Fit,
but I just want to know
for
why,
the purpose for which it was intended.
From a 30-seater to a 40-seater, what would have made the difference in having to sell them than keeping that? So that's why I'm asking if it is the size of the bus or what.
I spoke about the whole matter of maintenance costs. I think it was based on what we have recognized. It would have cost us a tremendous more than.
Just looks messy, Mr. Morgan.
The Chairman, what it appears to me is that you are seen as a cash cow, and somebody pushed their hands in your pocket and had you pay the deposit for the entire fleet, the 40 fleet. Is that what happened? My suspicion is Because, you know, you're left with a 5 members, 5 buses, which cannot be utilized in your, in your service. So somebody took a decision, erroneously, I may say.
But I don't think you said that it cannot be utilized. It's just that you recommend that you wanted smaller buses.
More efficient. That can be more efficiently used.
Especially
Based
for
on-
the rural.
Yes.
Especially for rural.
Yes. Because when you think about St. Mary and Portland and places like those.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. So have you found purchases for those buses?
He said he sold 4 of
You
the
sold
5
4.
already.
You have 1 left. 3,
Three
I
of the
believe he
5.
said.
3 of
Right. So for the other 2, you're just awaiting purchase for those other 2?
Well, you should ask the PS if JUTC would purchase them. You don't have to answer PS. It's okay. All right. Thank you.
To leave the PS and the Portmore Transport Center. Is it?
Is that to the PS?
Yes, the PS. Where are
Oh,
we?
okay.
Okay, as you know, the matter was sent to PIMSEC, PIMC,
Yeah.
from as far back as 2015, November, October, and they have been doing their evaluation. They requested a feasibility study. The feasibility study was done, and the ministry had been in discussion with them to get them primarily to understand that a facility of that nature is really for the public good rather than for the making of money.
So is it that PIMC has rejected?
No, they have not rejected. They have given approval for the project to go into the development stage and for us to come back with the terms of the financing, and that is being finalized by Ministry of Finance.
But PS, I mean, it was reported recently, just a couple of weeks ago, that it is off the table for this budget year. Right? At the beginning of the budget year, it was reported that it was at PIMC or PIMSEC, whichever acronym you want to use, for approval or for an overall look at the project. Now, the Belgian government has offered some resources, loans, towards the building of this facility. Yeah? So why are we, and I understand that we are outside the window. So have we lost that facility, or is it that we're still in the game? What is the issue?
We haven't lost it as yet. We have been in discussion with them.
But you're near losing it.
With the Belgian, they have actually written to us that if it is approved by the end of this year, they would accommodate the situation in which a drawdown on the loan.
But you don't seem to be in a position to take that advantage of that.
Well, we are working assiduously toward that together with the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance is in discussion also with the company that has offered the financing, that's ING Bank in Belgium, that has offered the commercial part of the financing, and we are anticipating that they should finalize that quickly.
That facility was announced both in the Prime Minister's presentation and also in the Governor General's as one of the projects that would be initiated in this financial year. So I'm surprised to hear now that we're not even close to breaking ground for that facility, and that we're threatened of probably losing that facility as it is now, because it was even in the last administration that PIMSEC started to look at that project, and it was reported in one of our dailies recently that it is no longer on the table by the minister himself, that it is no longer on the table because of fiscal space for this financial year. So I wonder who telling me the truth or not.
Well, as I said, Mr. Chairman, the letter that we got from the Belgian had indicated that, yes, they are willing to accommodate a drawdown beginning in 2018-2019 financial year, but they would want the facility to be approved during this fiscal year. We've had discussion with the Minister of Finance, and he has indicated that he has also directed his team to get all the approvals in place so that he can sign and he can sign off on their financing facilities.
In fact, Mr. Chairman, my information, Mr. Permanent Secretary, is that the Belgians are prepared to provide a loan of 47 million euros, and exactly, it's about 100% financing, I believe, and that both the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Transport and the government remains committed to ensuring that the people of Portmore, that this new transport facility is in fact built there. Because one of the things that we have to look at is in terms of the, it's very holistic in terms of revolutionizing transport in Portmore. I understand that a bus park will be there, even commuters to Kingston, they can have a park and ride facility where they come and they park their cars. Because when one consider the millions of dollars that the people of Portmore, these hard-working Jamaicans, have to pay for this toll money that does not do anything for the public purse of Jamaica, but it's another discussion.
The highest revenue earner for the toll authority is the JUTC buses, as is now.
But so the point is, as it relates to the expenses that the people of Portmore have to pay, this particular bus facility in Portmore, the government has not abandoned it, as per my information. Mr. Pace, you can confirm. Because one of the benefits also is that the people of Portmore, they can park their cars and they can now travel along, etc., saving toll, saving gas, etc. So this $47 million loan facility, can you confirm that? That is your understanding as well, that the Belgians have committed this $47 million loan facility. Now, sorry, can you just say that he's nodding his head? Can you just say yes into the mic so we can hear it, please?
That is a commitment that the Belgians have confirmed, and the government is the Ministry of Finance is.
No, but
thank you, Mr.
Pierce. Remember, we are tardy in executing the project. Over 2 years now, 2015, this is 2017.
And why would the Belgians
I have announced in Portmore about this. I've been promoting it.
If they thought that we were moving with alacrity with this project.
So, Mr. Pierce, it's reasonable to conclude that there's tardiness in concluding this matter.
No, it's checks and balances.
Is it reasonable?
No, it's not.
The reasonableness is relative. The cabinet...
Use a relativeness for reasonableness now.
It is on stream.
In the context of the procedure that has been imposed by cabinet, that is the introduction of this PIMC and a secretariat called PIMSEC, through which all government projects, all public sector investment must now be routed. And in the context that this was one of the first set of projects and one of the larger one that it had to evaluate, and they have been doing this from, as I said, from 2015.
But
the learning
15,
curve
16,
for them.
No, 15, 16. It was sent,
I agree.
And it was stated that it was sent back to them in 16, 17.
No, we have been. Yes, we eventually got a decision from them initially in 16, 17, and we respond promptly. We did the work that they asked us to do. They asked us to do additional work, and our team did the work. All this is saying
to me is that we are tardy in the implementation of this project, and because of that, you may just end up losing that loan facility.
No, we're not going to end up losing the loan facility.
I hope I can quote you on that one. Good.
Well,
all right, can we?
I can't go back to Portmore without this transport center, you know.
Members,
so you're going to keep me out, or are you going to allow me to go back?
Members, I think let's just end on that one. Do we have any questions for Jamaica Railway Corporation?
That's a pipe dream. That's going nowhere. It ends where it started, in somebody's mind.
The airport is here?
They were here last week or week before.
Spend your energy somewhere else, PS. The railway business. You know that.
Well, we have a report from them.
You can't.
Member. I think. Yes. Thank you. We have a report from them. I think the substantive point coming out of the report is really just can we get an update on the divestment to, what's the name of the, Gerzog? Huh?
Yes, Herzog.
Herzog, yeah.
Yes, I'll allow Mr. Fitzroy Williams to speak, but I'm just summarizing quickly the Herzog situation. They entered into an MOU with the government.
A non-binding MOU.
That expired in June of this year. It was a 6-month MOU. They asked for an extension, which expired in September of this year. They have done, to a certain extent, what was asked of them, their business plan, and they are now in discussion with both the enterprise team. There's a meeting going on while we are here today. And
did you get the required request, whatever you requested of them while you gave them the extension, did you get what you needed?
During the extension, we got a draft business plan. The final business plan were to have been submitted by the 9th of September. We had not received it. We have since received communication from them explaining why they had not submitted the business plan on time. They have requested a meeting, which is going on today. But the GRC is looking at alternatives.
Okay, so we're no further with Herzog as it is now.
As it is right now, no.
All right. Okay. So is Mr. Williams, our overall plan of the divestment, we're back at square one as it is, or where are we?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. The PS has summarized essentially what is the status in relation to the Herzog situation, which came out of a unsolicited proposal. However, the GRC has proactively, over the last year, been looking at various options and has been doing its own proposals and preparation of a business plan, anticipating that in the event that we did not move forward with the Herzog proposal, then there would be what we perceive would be a viable proposal that would be submitted to the government, to cabinet for consideration. And that's exactly where we are at this point in time. As Pierre said, there is actually a meeting. I got a text concerning that earlier that was going on with some of those parties while this meeting has been going on. I'm not privy to what transpired there, but we know that we have a viable proposal on the table in the event that we are called upon to proceed.
And if Herzog is not of a going interest, and what are the plans? Lay out some of the plans of the GRC because in your report you mentioned about the Montego Bay to Appleton and different phases.
Right. There are still 3 phases of the proposal. The first phase being the Montego Bay to Appleton, which is considered quite viable as a tourist, as a historic and kind of attraction. There are strong interests, local and overseas, waiting to pounce on that option in the event that Herzog did not go forward. As it relates to the rest of the network and in relation to what is happening on the international commodities market bauxite, there is quite a number of explorations going on to resuscitate a significant portion, if not the rest of
That's on the bauxite
the
lines.
network.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
The one challenge that we see, which is surmountable, is the connection back to Kingston because of the Sandy Gully Bridge. based on a number of considerations. If we pursue the proposal, the plans from the west back to Kingston, I think this is a doable project. I hear Member Jackson's view on the matter. I am interpreting that to mean just the MOU and not the rail system and the transport network in general. Just for the record, we want to make it clear that rail is still the most viable land transport system. We have 172 years of experience. The country needs to consider the savings to not only passengers but also to the goods sector for a system that is approximately 20 times less in cost of transportation than the current modalities that are being pursued.
The only thing I would say about that is that if it is going to be another subsidized sector, then if we're going to treat the JUTs, treat it like we treat the JUTC, then believe me, you wouldn't get my support on that one as it is now.
Well,
hence why we need to go private.
In our own defense, Chair, while the JRC or the railway system has moved between private and public hands for the 172 years of its existence, by law, by statute, we pay our own way and we earn our own keep. I like to tell people that IMF did not introduce balanced budgeting in Jamaica. It's on JRC's books. It's in our law that our budget must be balanced. We shouldn't spend a cent more.
And you and I know
that
that passenger alone can subsidize.
But through strong fiscal defense, strong fiscal discipline over the last 5 years, we have shown that we can generate surpluses. We have done so over the last 5 years, and I think with the existing business model, we can make Jamaica can make rail service a profitable
And you and I know
venture.
if you didn't have so much real estate, probably the profits that you're showing wouldn't even be made. But thank you very much. Thank you.
On the
Mr.
contrary,
Chairman.
Chair, on the contrary, in
Mr.
fact,
Chairman.
our real estate asset is even more critical to the process.
Good presentation, sir. Thank you. I listened to you thoroughly and I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, man.
Good luck to you and
We
to
will
the...
continue to dream.
Yeah. No.
We
But
do all.
as a growing interest, though, we would love to see something happening with the assets. Don't get me wrong. But as I said, I would hate for it to be another entity being subsidized by the government of Jamaica right now. That's just my only concern. But I am hoping that something, especially that line between Montego Bay and Appleton, which by all records can be a profitable route and for the JRC and just for tourism on a whole, that I would love to see that coming to being first. So I am happy to hear
that's
that.
the plan, Chair.
Yes, and I'm happy to hear that if it is not Herzog, there are others who are interested in it. So we will keep an update on the matter. Thank you, Mr. Williams. JBI, would you like to just quickly give an opening statement?
Our priority for the year, Chairman, was in terms of getting the industry back on its feet. The first hot one was in terms of getting Alpart restarted, which has restarted. It's still going through its teething phases, but it is happening, and also the plans going forward. The other was in terms of getting the LNG program for Jamalco in place. That is also going apace because that will keep the Jamalco facility in a very economic situation and making them very profitable again. In maintaining the operations at Yorton and all the maintenance of the Noranda. Those are in terms of operations. We spend a lot of time with regard to the environment, monitoring all the operations, both closed and open, and also in terms of community relations, mainly through our Bauxite Community Development Program. One of the areas that we have really made headway in is with regard to our rainwater harvesting and greenhouse project using the mined out lands. This has been going very well. I think to date, at the end of September, we now have 160 greenhouses in place, and we're still going to be growing. And we continue our community programs in all of the areas in terms of community centers, training, and infrastructure. Those are the main areas that we have concentrated on, sir, and we continue to do well to bring back our industry.
Chairman, as a member of Parliament for South Manchester, we have been impacted in a very negative way as it relates to the proposed removal of the bauxite levy. What would you say, Mr. Leo? How will the bauxite company and the communities relate as it relates to assistance that we normally get? Last year, I was able to get $4 million through the JBI, which I was able to assist with some roads and some other community development. The citizens are really getting a little bit restive when they see the trucks rolling in and out, and to know that nothing will be coming to their assistance as it relates to the infrastructure development, especially in the areas Lancaster, Green Pond, the Harmons Valley, and those areas there. What can you do to say to the citizens, what can I take back to them to assure them that all is not lost?
The Bauxite Community Development Program will continue. We're putting in our budget for the next phase, and we'll continue in these areas that we have mentioned in terms of the water harvesting, but also the community projects with the respective members of Parliament. That program will go through, and I'm sure that it will get the support that it needed when it comes to the House for approval. I was just going to say,
you're hoping that it will go through.
Yes.
Because
I tell you,
and why I say that is when we looked at the fiscal papers that has been tabled in the House. We had Minister of Finance here. It is showing a zero revenue coming from bauxite to JBI, basically. So, you know, if that is so, then it is a hope that you will have a budget to do those things.
No, there is an inflow from levy, and I will leave that for the Minister of Finance to sort out. But we know that there is an inflow from levy that will allow us, plus also because of the success of the greenhouse projects, the World Bank is very supportive and will be providing additional funds for us to continue this, because they see this as a fantastic opportunity to demonstrate that there can be life after mining in mining areas. They were here just last month. There were a delegation of 17 that came to look at our greenhouses, and I think it is a really world-class standard stuff that we're doing, and are prepared to support that. So with their help and the inflow that we do have from some levy coming in, not at the level that it used to be, that we do think that the community projects will be able to continue.
And I don't see how possible it is going to be when you had a revenue of $2 billion in 16-17 down to 131 million estimated in this fiscal year. And it is of concern because I too have a constituency that is affected by mining, not as badly as MP Stewart, but you know, even at the $4 million that is attributed to each constituency has been woefully inadequate to do what is necessary for us, for the purposes of what that levy is supposed to be for. And if it is that they may not be, and I'm hoping, as you are hoping, that there will be funds for these community developments, be it that $4 million was inadequate and we may not get another one, then, you know, and that's why the importance of that levy, be it that we reduce the amount of the levy, the percentage of the levy. But I think it is owed to the people of Jamaica and those communities that are affected by the mining, that there is an inflow. Because, you know, for me, I invite you to come and look at the Mile Gully Basin as it is now, which is 90% untouched by mining. And I want you to look at it now, because 90% of those lands that will be mined is currently in agriculture. When you mine those lands, all those farmers will be out of production. And I you know, with a meeting with Jamaica a couple months ago, I asked, why not go in now and try and see how it is that we can diversify the income base of those farmers that will be displaced, and not wait until after they are displaced. Then you start looking at it. And I was told that they are not earning anything there. No, so hence why they can't do anything. And when I have those 100+ farmers that is going to be displaced, I mean, the only thing that can follow is poverty after. No, because after you mine, the land reclamation is not even something that they can even farm on. And when you talk about the greenhouses, the effect of the greenhouses on the wider community is not as effective as we make it out to be. It isn't.
Chairman, I share your passion, and I must tell you that I have a stake in this as well, because as much as I'm supporting for the funding for those projects, the funding that you're talking about from levy also means the funding for my organization, because we depend on that source for our revenue. It's interesting that you mentioned the Mile Gully area, because I will tell you, and I will say it here, it's only just yesterday that I called in Jamaica, and only yesterday I was saying that we have to pay attention to that Mile Gully area. So I'll be meeting with them to dealing with that, because I agree with you that you can't just sit around and wait, but you need to look to the different things to do.
And I think last week we met, and I mean, because we've been putting in some tourism, community tourism projects, they said that they'll see how it is that they can work with us as a wider community. You know, but I would hate for us to wait until after.
Sure. I do agree with you that we need to discuss it and to not wait until after the event, and have a plan, a forward-going plan that we can work towards.
How is it this, since the revenue from the levy is being reduced and we are looking at a profit sharing? I don't know if yourself or the PS can shed any light on if we have started to earn anything from the profit sharing, or if we will ever earn anything from the profit sharing. Because it would be sad if we have given up the levy for this profit sharing and never see anything from it.
But I think as the PS would indicate that this is something for the Ministry of Finance to deal with, so I wouldn't venture into that area this time.
Yes?
As he said, it's really the Ministry of Finance that deal with that aspect of things. But
and
generally,
and last week they sent us to you?
Generally, the LME has been moving in the right direction, and the outlook is very good for the sector. And because our profit sharing arrangement involve profit sharing in the alumina plant as well, things are looking very
But have we started to earn anything?
In terms of earning, the JBM is here, and they have been earning, and also
I'm speaking about particularly from the profit sharing.
We have been earning what is it, the royalty?
Yeah.
And the profit sharing
what
as well.
I'd like to say,
so the earnings are accruing, and payments have been made. I don't have all the details in terms of what goes directly to Ministry of Finance.
One of the things that I will ask of you then, PS, is up until at least for the first 6 months of this financial year, if we could get, especially, and I would love to see a comparison of what we would have earned in revenue from the levy compared to what it is that we're earning from this profit sharing.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I would like to say is that the levy situation is still on the books. Nothing has changed.
No, I know it is on the books.
Right.
But we're not earning from it.
But we are earning. Noranda, who still has to pay the levy, they do pay the amount that they have given, and we're collecting on that. There are some companies that have waivers, and we have to work through that situation. But the levy arrangement is still on the books.
Right, but if I'm to go by your revenue stream, I mean, you will be earning enough just to keep your doors open, basically. Yeah, you know. So then, right. So if you're only earning enough to keep your doors open, then your other responsibilities that you would have would be short.
Not where we want to be, but we're striving to get back there.
I understand, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, while I listened quite well to the eloquent voice of Mr. Patrick Leo, we had a meeting on Thursday last with the high-level team at Jamalco with some citizens from the mining areas in South. And we left with not a very good feeling based on what is transpiring there and what the plans are. I have subsequently written to the Honorable Minister asking for a tour and a sit-down meeting with the Bauxite Institute and Jamalco to look at the way forward as it relates to the impact of bauxite mining in South, because the citizens have gotten extremely poor since bauxite mining came there. And the environmental impact, it is really, really difficult and challenging at this time, among other issues. But I would like to ask another question, Mr. Leo, as it relates to the land acquisition. Who negotiates on behalf of the citizens? Because I had a meeting also with one of the managers there, and I was told that it's a matter of Caesar appealing to Caesar, where the bauxite companies come in and they do the negotiation, offer the citizens or the residents X amount, and there is no group or designated body that defends the rights of the citizens. Could you explain to me the process?
The process, as I understand it, and I've been around for quite some time, is that the initial arrangement is between the companies and the private citizen. If they come to an amicable arrangement, then that is sealed. If there is a problem and the citizens feel that they need help, then the usual person that appeal to is the Commission of Mines. And they have a team that will work with them in terms of making sure that justice is done. Mr. Roach here, former Commissioner of Mines, has a lot of experience in that area, and that's the area in which we can help. But we don't go in as a first game. I don't have Coy if you have anything to say on that.
Normally what happens, I've been out of the Commissioner of Mines for 11 years now, but normally what happens is that if the two cannot come to an amicable agreement, it's referred to the Commissioner, who would sit with both and listen and then mediate. The Commissioner is really a mediator. It's not a legal thing that he will rule and say you must pay, the company must pay this amount. It's really a mediation process, which the Commissioner tried to get amicable price. I remember in the past I have had where we put the money in escrow from the company. It was more to do with not being able to settle, because you have a problem in the countryside where my father might die and leave a plot of land for 6 kids, and then we disagreed. So the Commissioner would go in there and mediate that, get the money from the company and put it in escrow for them until they can agree among themselves. But so there is that medium of getting some redress for the citizen.
I indicated there the Commissioner of Mines because he has legal status. We at the JBI also try to help to facilitate, but we don't have the legal status of the Commissioner of Mines, so we go under the umbrella of the Commissioner of Mines to assist. So we assist as much as possible, but we don't have the legal strappings to go with it. We'll also appeal, of course, to the ministry to help us in the process.
Do you not think that it is the Bauxite Institute or the Commissioner should negotiate with the bauxite company on behalf of the citizens rather than the citizens, you know, when somebody comes and offers them $1 million, they see that as a lot of money. But by the time the bauxite company mines a plot, they have made back 3 times that amount of money, and the persons are left wondering what they have done. So I believe that the body, there should be a body negotiating with the bauxite company on behalf of the citizens when it comes to the sale or the acquisition of land for mining.
That's where the Commission of Mines, and I know that the Commission of Mines also liaises with the Commission of Lands to make sure that with regard to land transaction, that they're within the right ballpark in what they're doing with regard to land valuation and stuff like that. But I think we're going into an area which is a little bit deeper than our competence at this time. It's something that could have more discussion.
Can I, Mr. Chairman? I know the minister had indicated, you know, among the policy initiative, that there needs to be a better regime to facilitate landowners and the whole restoration, all of that. And it's something that the ministry is looking at very, very seriously. And if there needs to be legislative change in terms of how the negotiation is done and how even appeals can be handled, for instance, in some areas, other areas, dealing with entities who can have an appeals tribunal, for instance, that could make decisions, then those are things that we're going to look at in the policy and the legislation going forward.
All right. Anyone has any questions for Maritime Authority? The Maritime Authority, any questions? No one, that's CMU. The chairman, I mean, member seems to be hungry. All right, just one question. Any update on the shipping registry?
Thank you. A transaction advisor has been selected by the enterprise team, and this appointment is to be approved by the NCC, I suspect, at the end of this month. So we are on the way to the appointment of this advisor who will take us to the what they call market sounding, where we'll identify a contractor or an investor and hopefully to negotiations by 2018.
So we're moving along with the plan registry then?
Yes, it's a slow process, but we expect by next year we should be able to.
Slower than we anticipated, but it is happening.
Yes, Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I don't know. I get a little bit weary with, we've been through this. So, no, about the registry. I remember sitting down here, probably saw the downside of being here as long as you have, Port Antonio comes to mind. And all the ships that will come through the, and I don't know. When I listen to people who know more than I know, and they tell me these things, and I get hopeful, and I try to transmit that hope out there, and it not delivered, I get embarrassed.
Right. In relation to Port Antonio and mega yachts, we have a mega yacht registry. It's growing very fast. We have over 200 mega yachts now, primarily owned by billionaires out of North America,
Yes.
Saudi Arabia. So that is doing very well. It's a commercial ship registry where we have our tankers, cruise ships, container vessels. We're trying to privatize that in order to grow it more rapidly than it is growing at the moment.
But as I mentioned about that side of it, which is where in my interest, I understand what with the other commercial liner, but the understanding I had with the billionaire ship registry for Port Antonio, we'll have more of those rich ships calling in. That's what generate economic activity in and around the Port Antonio, Portland area. Is that being manifested, and what is it that is required to get more of those rich vessels coming into the port? And, you know, I know you get revenue from the registration, right? But we want to be able to see these things affecting the local economy.
Right, so we're leveraging the success of the mega yacht registry to bring some of those yachts to Jamaica. We were able to negotiate one mega yacht coming last year, but they didn't have a good experience with Port Antonio and Montego Bay. It was not only the harassment, it was also the number of, let's say, regulators boarding and checking. So we're actually meeting to try and resolve this issue. We have legislation now in place to issue a cruising permit, which is a document they will receive on arrival, which will allow them uninhibited cruising around Jamaica.
Sir, with all due respect, these are things that make me get upset and frustrated. You guys who are in the business, you know what the market is like. We are told about what people expect, different class of tourists when they come, what we have to have. All of what you're telling me about is part of the infrastructure that is needed to facilitate these business, these eye rollers coming in. Not having much checks, the pre-checks arrangement made. Those are not supposed to be things we discover. It's not a new era we're going into. I mean, there's a new era that has not been happening anywhere else in the world. Yes, that's a new, we learn from other places. So when we invite these people in, we lay the wicket so that what we want to happen does happen. We do these things and we blunder, and then the bad name go out and it then make it worse for the subsequent ones. That means we're not doing our homework. I respect professionalism. I respect it. And I rely on it. As I don't know. But you guys ought to know these things.
Right, so the Maritime Authority has had no issues. We have been facilitating these yachts to come to Jamaica and cruise. The issue is in relation to things like immigration and customs. And yes, I agree, we need to have more joined up government to ensure that
is
all
the
those
issue.
agencies.
That is the issue.
Right.
Before you even start inviting them, you should have had that join up relationship.
Sure.
But let me ask you, how long now have been working on this registry?
The PPP?
Yeah.
The PPP has been around since, I think, last year. Last year.
And the legal framework for it has been?
The legal framework is in place. We've had good support from the Ministry of Transport in the last few months. So most of the legislation is now either at the final stages with the OPC or to go before legislation committee. So we don't have an issue right now with legislation not being in train to make it competitive.
And that join up relationship with yourself and the other entities before you start inviting anybody else for the same mistake?
Right. We've been meeting, I think, on Friday we'll meet with customs again to try and resolve this issue of the cruising permit, which, as I said, will allow for uninhibited cruising around Jamaica without having to report to a customs officer at each port. So that is being discussed as we speak.
And the other agencies?
The Immigration Department. Our main issue is with customs. It's with customs. And the fact that even though we've had discussions at a high level, the persons on the ground have had...
You know, because this is nothing new within the Caribbean itself. I mean, you go to the Bahamas, you go to even Barbados, they are facilitated. And if it is a part of the tourism sector that we are trying to tap into, we have to get it right because there are other options out there. You know, we have to get it right. So I hope that we don't have another experience like that. But I hope that we can get it right this time around.
I just have two questions for him, Mr. Chairman. About how many yachts would you say come to cruise our waters each year?
In terms of visiting yachts, I would say not more than maybe 20 currently. Most of our yachts on the register don't come to Jamaica. They trade elsewhere. So we have locally owned yachts based in the marinas.
Right.
But in terms of visiting yachts, I would say a handful. And that is what we're trying to expand.
Right.
To expand. Yeah.
And what is the potential revenue to to the country when you've looked at your expansion, etc.?
Significant. The cruise passenger spends maybe $100 per passenger. A yachty will spend thousands, 10,000 for the weekend, even more. So it's a low footprint activity and high revenue.
That's why I'm so upset, because those are the opportunities we are losing to build the economy of these communities like Port Antonio and adjoining areas. That's how we're going to have growth. That's what this prosperity thing here, because of fleeting illusion, unless you do those things. Fix those things.
Right.
Make some progress so that prosperity can come.
Right. Well, is there no?
You've answered the question, and I thank you for the insight you've given as relates to the hope and prosperity that you will man in this particular area. Thank you, sir.
Let me thank you, and we'll be following the progress as you move along. Let me, PS and the team, truly let me thank you for, we didn't want to bring you back another week. So that's why we decided to just stretch it and run the race. But let me thank you again for staying with us and for being a part. I know last week, and I apologize again for last week, but then I think we have completed our deliberations of the Ministry of Transport and Mining. Members, if there is any other business, can I move for the adjournment? All three, thank you. Meeting adjourned.